Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, 2023, is an American superhero film based on the DC Comics character Aquaman. It serves as the sequel to the 2018 film Aquaman and the final movie in the DC Extended Universe, DCEU, before James Gunn and Peter Safran's reboot. Director, James W.N., who also directed the first film, release date, December 22, 2023. Runtime, 124 minutes, 2 hours 4 minutes, budget, $205 to $15 million worldwide box office, approximately $440 million, a commercial disappointment relative to its budget and the first film's success of over $1.15 billion. Main cast, Jason Momoa as Arthur Curry, Aquaman, Patrick Wilson as Orm Marius Ocean Master, Arthur's half-brother, Amber Heard as Meriahia Abdulmateen II as David Kane, Black Manta supporting. Nicole Kidman, Atlanta, Randall Park, Dr. Stephen Shin, Dolph Lundgren, King Nereus, Temuera Morrison, Thomas Curry, and others. Years after the events of the first film, Arthur Curry, Aquaman, is now the King of Atlantis while also balancing life on land as a husband to Mera and father to their young son, Arthur Jr. He struggles with the responsibilities of kingship and feels restless. Meanwhile, Black Manta, who survived the first film and seeks revenge for his father's death, becomes far more dangerous. He discovers the powerful Black Trident, an ancient artifact tied to the lost seventh kingdom of Atlantis called Necros. This weapon is possessed by the evil spirit of Kordax, an ancient Atlantean king. To stop Black Manta from unleashing catastrophic destruction, including accelerating climate change, Arthur must team up with his former enemy and half-brother, Orm. The story blends high-stakes action, brotherly bonding, environmental themes, and over-the-top underwater spectacle. Family and brotherhood. The core emotional arc focuses on Arthur and Orm reconciling their fractured relationship and learning to work together. Environmentalism, climate change. The film heavily features messages about global warming, pollution, and the need for surface dwellers and Atlanteans to cooperate. Black Manta's use of an ancient power source, orichalcum, accelerates environmental disaster, building bridges between people, kingdoms, and worlds. Atlantis finally reveals itself to the surface. Reception. Critics gave the film mostly negative to mixed reviews, around 34 to 35% on Rotten Tomatoes. Many called it visually impressive in parts but criticized the story as derivative, rushed, and overly silly. Audiences were more forgiving but still found it weaker than the colorful, fun first movie. It underperformed at the box office, especially domestically, partly due to franchise fatigue and the announced DCEU reboot. Ending and legacy. Major spoilers. Arthur and Orm defeat Black Manta and Kordax in an epic battle in the Lost Kingdom. Arthur destroys the Black Trident, breaking the ancient curse. In the end, Arthur reveals Atlantis to the United Nations and commits to sharing their technology to fight climate change. He also frees Orm, allowing his brother a chance at redemption. A fun post-credit scene shows Orm trying surface food, including a cockroach on a burger, paying off an earlier joke. The film ends the original DCEU on a hopeful, bridge-building note, but with the reboot coming, most characters, including this version of Aquaman, were not expected to continue in the new DC universe. Overall verdict. It's a loud, colorful, CGI-heavy superhero popcorn movie with impressive underwater visuals, fun brotherly banter, especially between Momoa and Wilson, and classic James W.N. spectacle. However, it feels overstuffed, less fresh than the first film, and suffers from production troubles, reshoot rumors, Amber Heard's reduced role amid controversy. In this video, we dive into the movie Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. We will discuss a storyline, summarize the plot, and explore the cast and character. Additionally, we will cover the movie's productions and box of the performance. Finally, we will provide reviews and share personal reaction. So, let's get started. Several others movies saw bumps in revenue about big and small. Avoid extended New Year's weekend. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom just managed to say F Lord as it enters 2024, crossing to $50 million milestone. The superhero sequel has garnered Allen to shabby $258 million globally, taking it by a marvelous $205 million lifetime total. Aquaman 2 delivered one of the lowest debut in the Jackal history of the now-defunct DC Extended Universe, and it seems like the mixed review and plentiful alternatives on offer have impacted the film's performances, especially in the domestic market. Aquaman is yet to press the $80 million marks at Stillside in 10-year days of releasing. However, the DC film is being served by overseas market where it has generated $173 million. So far, most of it coming from China. However, at this point, there can only be so much more air left in this lung. The best that it can conceivably do to surpass a lifetime global haul of fellow superhero and performer D flies to $70 million. Aquaman can also find some solace in the fact that it has now outperformed the recent DC shim Fury of the Gods, and the Blue Beans were also impacted by a perceived behind-the-scene chose that has consumed the franchise started a decade ago with the Man of Sail. The duo experience major ups and downs with a revolving tour of executive assuming control and jumping ship. The highly publicized reboot Under the Sea ship are James Gunn and Peter Safran essentially spelldome for the old leadership remaining film. The series will start at first in 2025 with Gunn's Superman Legacy starring David Goldsweet and Rajal Bonan, and Child in the Sea would hope that they love for superhero movies by then. The genre has witnessed the mass loss of that with a series of super reclasses across the DC Marvel. Aquaman 2 his father proved unless the quality is excellent, the average viewer is no longer interested in the sampling big budget superhero fare. Only a handful of superhero movies such as Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 and Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse performed well in 2003. Directed by James W. and starring Justin Mumbo and Patrick Wilson, Aquaman 2 serves as a sequel to 2018 Aquaman. Also directed by Van. The first Aquaman movie emerged as a super surprise blockbuster, grossing over $1.1 billion worldwide over the course of its run. Aquaman, on the other hand, will challenge allies to the Looking Glass for the biggest swap of between sequel. Stay tuned to the Collider of more update. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom recently made a box office milestone that helped make it a nice cop to the DCU. The movie is a direct sequel to the surprise hit Woman, which is the highest crossing DCU film by a wide margin. This likely helped create more interest in Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, despite the fact that the DCU will not be continuing after it. Some members may also have been curious to see the conclusions of the DCU, which started back in 2013 with Man of Sail. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom has now made approximately $434 million at the global box office. According to the number, this makes it the first DCU movie sells the original Aquaman to make over $400 million. This means Aquaman and Lost Kingdom is also the highest grossing DC movie since 2018. Hopefully his up-saving in box office number can continue our interested new DC board that will launch in theaters next year with the Superman Legacy. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom has the 7th highest worldwide box office in the DCU. This places it almost directly in the middle of the pack in terms of overall ticket sale. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom continue the DCU trend of sequels underperforming. It is still the DCU direct sequel that performed their best at the box office. It is the second best performing sequel of Batman vs. Superman. Dawn of Justice can be considered a sequel to Man of Steel. Another big achievement for Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom was its ability to break with the General John W. brand of DCU movies since the first Aquaman. In general, besides Aquaman, the DCU box office has been on steady decline since release of Batman vs. Superman of Justice in 2016. The fact that Echo Man and the Last Kingdom was able to jump so far back of the first after some major financial disappointment in the same year like Shazam Fab is a testament to the film's success and the seeing power of the first Aquaman. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom opened to $80 million at international box office, which is not at the super, considering those are on par with the eventual big budget superhero disappointments like The Floods, The Marvels and Ant-Man. Anniversary as the King of Atlantis and directed by James Wang has generated $20 million globally to start, including a week $40 million in North America. The Warner Bros. NBC film cost $25 million and is shaping up to be the latest underperforming, then pulled a 40C falling this year of mispriced The Flash, Shazam, Freddy of the Gods and the Blue Beetle. Beyond the terrible reviews and Metakure or score, Aquaman show is struggling because it has been positioned as a lame duck in the DC Extended Universe, is a final installment before DC's new bosses James Gunn and Peter Safran. This side is spoiling superheroes universe likely without Momoa's ruler of the Android Kingdom. The first film 2018 Aquaman debuted a time when comic book movies go to no wrong at a box office. It became a massive commercial shoe success with $81 million internationally and $1.14 million globally. The original was particularly huge in China, opening to $93 million and ending its run with $292 million. But Hollywood movies have not worked in China since a pandemic, and The Last Kingdom was no exception. The sequel did not come everywhere close to the popularity of the original, bringing in just $13 million over the weekend from 28,140 seconds. Outside of the Middle Kingdom had a dropped international market where Mexico with $5 million, Indonesia and $3.6 million, France with $3.2 million and the UK with $3 million. Today the Chinese market is a fraction of what it was for American movies, says David G., who runs a movie consulting from Franchise Entertainment Research. Overall foreign business you'll still be good, just not standing where us may not be breaking out a bibble for women and Lost Kingdom, but the studio has more to be celebrated within Wonka, which cross a $250 million market from 2 weeks of release, prequel stating Chamois Talmont as a Century Cole Willie WAI $33.20 $200 million from Sis Sun International, a scan 33% drop from the prior weekend. Wonka has generated $171 million. Ours is $254 million to do it. It's a Swiss. The film cost $125 million. Alice Universal's and Illumination's Animative's comedy Migration has underwhelmed the international box office with $22 million for 2 weeks. It opened in North America with the $17 million over a 4 days holiday, bringing its worldwide total to $34 million. The film, written by Mike White and featuring the Wise cast of Kale, Illa Bad Banks and Hakana, cost a reasonable $70 million. But the studio is hoping that Migration enjoys the staying power of recent family movies such as Passing Board's The Last Wish. Any Pixels element, the adventures about ducks who get lost as they head south for winter, has generated positive reviews and score, which bodies well for his holiday run after 5 years, the best superhero movie of 2018 and not win Oscar, and finally back with a sequel. Aquaman remains a high point of DCO. A fantastical adventure movie with great world building, cool performances, an excellent horror scene, and some of the most bonkers moment in the superhero Gina Outs on Army of Gra people and Julie Andrews playing an aquatic U. Now Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom double dawn on everything his predecessor did by letting them go fullers. It explained the word of Aquaman by bringing in a magical dread and introducing this issue to murder. It has a potent story, the body current to the environment, and it also gives us a fun road trip movie with Jass's Momo and Patrick Wilson as waking brother that runs forward after that, with this being not only the end of the Equity universe at large. There's a lot writing on Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom to deliver a satisfying conclusion. The movie deals with the Archer Curie struggling to balance his duties as a father with his duties as a client and also as a superhero. No matter what, he is not satisfied by anything in his life. Much like Brian Oker in the Fast and Furious movies, he is in dire need of an adventure. Thankfully, that is exactly what Aquaman Momo gets. One Black Manta discovers a Black Trident, Nautical and Girl's artifact belonging to Codex, the long-dormant king of Narcos, the Seven Kingdom of Atlantis. Turn out that Codex was in Atlant before the fall of Atlantis. Codex tried to take over the kingdom with a trident essentially turned into the motor fueled by Atlantis fossil fuels and a thirst for war, until Atlan froze the whole city using blood magic. In the present, Black Mana slowly become possessed by Codex as he sets out to free the evil king in order to gain revenge on Aquaman. To stop him, Natra has to team up with his imprisoned brother Arm as a two bond on journey of brotherhood. Eventually the brothers make it to be in target where Narcos lies. They require the help of returning kings and Ibrian King Johnny Roy Davis to help rescue Walter Jr., who was kidnapped by a black muncher, in order to use his blood to free Codex. What uses what is a very cool battle on top of the massive Atlantan fortress with all sort of deep sea creatures and monsters involved. Aquaman and Arm reach Black Manta and succeed at taking that right in from him, but it briefly process or instead thankfully thanks to the power-up family or help a kill right as he wake up from his slumber. Family united, Arthur decided not to attend Arm back to the prison but instead fake his so he can be free, at least with encouragement of his life brother. Archer also takes a decision to unaware Atlantis to the surface world, viewing to share their technology and knowledge with the world to solve climate change. A big theme of the Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom is that of environmental conversation in trying to free Codex Black, the Atlantis equivalent of fossil fuel, and burns it in order to accelerate global warming. So the poles melt and occur that land is spent that energy source for body damage. Car environment is not subtle. This is clearly a topic dear to Jason Momoa, who has a story by credit on the film, as a triumphant end of the film is not a victory over Black Mega but a moment when Aquaman successfully covenants the jury work together to save the environment. He has become a bridge between two worlds and his peace with his different role. As for Rome, he followed in the tradition of so many fast and furious villains by realizing that evil were plan or nothing else to the power of family. He spends a movie slowly bonding with his brother. Realizing that is a better king and that Arm does not need a throne to be happy, he is finally free from expectation. Free to go to the surface and have his first size burger. While like Man and the Lost Kingdom and leaves the door open to the new stories, things are complicated by the fact that it is as we know it is officially and finally over. Mom recently commented on the fate of refers to Entertainment Weekly. I don't necessarily want it to be end, but I don't think it's really like a choice. The truth of it is, I mean, if the audience loves it then there is a possibility, but right now I am like it's not looking too good. We know that a new DC universe is set to start from the crash with a new canon and only a handful of characters from the current era making it to the new one. As of this writing, there has been no confirmation of the characters of Aquaman appearing in the new DC universe. And there is no confirmed Justice League or project, but all hints suggest that we are slowly building up to a new Justice League, a much different one than before, seemingly based on the Justice League in a national team which sadly does not include a woman. As for when, it is clear he cares about the world effect, and as he said in an interview with the Empire, I have not directed a third movie in series before. So I would be open to doing an appointment if I got the same freedom I have hired on these first two, as the chances will say non-Clary one added. I have earned to Never Say Never debut in 2008 with the Iron Man. The Marvel Cinematic Universe MCU has grown into an interconnected saga and the highest-grossing film franchise of all time. Unlike the more grounded aesthetic of Christopher Nolan's Batman trilogy, the MCU has fully embarrassed the full colorency of his comic book heritage. Stories unfold across space and charm and therefore often bypass possibility to pursue the role of cool. This place is celebration, a moment that also become awesome. Leo surfing on a flight of S in S.H.I.E.L.D. while no coping in The Lord of Ring. The Two Tower would make the cut, however his gravity run up a collapsing base as seen in The Hobbit. The Battle of Five Armies would not make this list because it's a completely impossible and also dumb. One last note, this list only include the mainline Avenger film with no exception. Captain America, Civil War, and his Avenger film in all name, featuring the entire Dreams, Mies and Hope. Given the film introduces Black Venture and Spider-Man, we will call it Never. One of the ongoing subplot in the Avengers into Green Line Banner due, where one misstep transforms the quiet scientist into an enormous green large S monster, as Harry Jen Sanchan helpfully point out after Banner awakened in a pile of wreckage. Son, you have got a condition. Indeed, the film drives a lot of attention from his predicament and Loki, memorable hero, even a prospective one, but with no regard to possible collateral damage. Tony Stark pairs mostly quite literally. What's your secret? Milo as Bango drowns her bag of feet. It's mostly played as a joke. Out doesn't have a secret and it's a big one. As one of the comes bearing down on the team, he gives him the sinky. He's always mad despite outward appearances. Bruce Panel lives in a state of the retrospectful age. He is a fun except code for Rolling Stone. The Avengers director Josh Wan realize his statement was seen and hook out well, just like a flipping a switch. He calmly walks over the lean. She does another shirt as he become mean and green and socks the flying armored well in the jaw, bringing it to a dead stopping world drop cost aside, while Reveal and his ambassador complications remain one of the MCU's wildest moment. The entire climatic battle in Avengers Endgame plays like a fans will see him and include any number of moment that could earn no sport here. 71 that takes the SC is rarely face across the battlefield as a hero to get Infinity Glet and all his gum to be light machine in the back of Louis. Her case start with the Gant led by but smartly passes it off to be Black Venture despite his Super Sant and Vibranium Scanshaw is overpowered and passes the burden to Spider-Man is quickly impaled body, thus promoting one of the most awesomely outlandish sequences ever come to film. Spider-Man catches a ride from which was thrown by Captain America and is covered by the paperboard. In her rescue armor and is sewn into the back of Pegasus ridden by the last aggression. They never reach the win but is beside the point for she has disco beaten. The entire premises of Captain America Civil War is built toward provoking the super friend toward inner conflict and dissolution, sort of like his breakup of the battle bit but with no more explosion and one-liner. Helmut Zumo masterfully manipulate our hero, but it all boils down to this: who is Star's bestie, as in highlighter they can be only one in one corner. Tony sacked a good time guy with all the toys he his opponent bears as a former assassin looking to join over a new leaf. The fight is cool and the film airs it, providing proper motivation to everyone. One in word, but it turns us bored here because it's still stringing credibility. Our disable so broken she can only settle differences with her fist while hamming Archon boards into the in Avenger Age of Alone encounters when Maxim she tries to be him, which is usually funny. He presently does Avenger. He is impervious to such sorcery to every next one. Finding in creepy has gorgeous river sort of waking eyes wide shot M shining a blind hammer. All the entries to a strange lighting shoot out of the door. Specs dusting the dancing the unlocker. If you have not figured it out yet, this is one of the more bizarre item on this list. Amid all the chore glimpses shiny gems floating in space. Trouble the lighter locate a mystical pool. If the Watcher spirit accept me, I can return to my dream and find what I missed. You read that right? Water spirit Chandas around the pole yielding as lighting showed out of his desk. Just again from that somehow he come to be understand the nature of the Infinity Stone and importance of having Vision on the team. It's a super clumsy narrative device and not one of the MCU's finest moment, but it's also hilariously memorable. After crash landing on Titans in Avengers Infinity War, the Avengers join forces bloody Guardians of the Galaxy to take on the phone. Doctors Arrange decided to use the dance zone to SQ into the future and may be avoided to 40 point. The stakes are high when channels finally arrive, but Avengers Guardian Team Up only managed to exact a single drop of blood from the mad Titan. Yaki is considering everything goes as Doctors are strange and forcing there is something else that is white her to be no. Patrick will deciding to beat on a desk tone with the gun lead was in your grasp. Consider this the fat of the galaxy and enjoy billion of lives hang on a ride rescuing squad from the quantum realm. Even when dealing with the fantastic that is one tin bargain in a void of gods and most super soldier and science experiment is just out there a bow and draw arrow. His whole deal is pretty Lutic Rose. He is not hiding any shocking and fantastic ability. He is just a super accurate with a stone edge weapon. A setting of the bowls aside, a gun is aimingly more useful when it come to it. He is not all that different from Black Widow in term of the capabilities of skill. I think he can do she can do better, except the whole boating thing. Avengers Age of Ultron shines a light of the ridiculousness of the situation while fighting Ultron's minions on a floating island. High himself provider by the for while breaking commentary. Okay, look, the city is flying. We are fighting an army of robot and I have a bow and arrow. None of this makes sense. It's such a shaky way of winking at the horns and telling us Marvel is on a joke and is doing so seeks to exonerate her again for serious security out like time travel, multiverse and quantum realm. The Carboy remain the most ridiculous thing in the MCU. A big part of the MCU's charm is a sheer spectre. These are impossibly powerful character doing incredible bulleting. Give or take Captain America arm wrestling a helicopter back to the helicopter. Spider-Man string to the hold the very Guardians of the Galaxy while standing the Power Stone. Yet among all the displays of power we have witnessed across the MCU, one remains undefeated after escaping from the trap light for him on Titan is Avenger Infinity War. Thanos waste no arms subduing the heroes. 2 sees Doctor Strange like a sake of the potato and lays out the Guardian with a blast from the Power Stone. He saved the most brutal counterattack for love, reaching into the sky with his gauntlet. Thor shatters the moon and uses the Fury Faces to rain destruction on Iron Man. It's a devastating reversal from what seemed like an Avenger victory and lays bare just no outmatch that heroes truly are. The 2 smartest members are Avengers Concord, a solution to their uncontrollable rigging games problem. It's not a sleeping gas. A mixtape of Black Widow B or pictures of Purple Hand and Kitten, any of which would probably do trick. The solution is a really big Iron Man sword with wish to punch the Hulk in the face. But like most of us, Hook does not like getting like it, only make him angrier. The angrier he gets, the stronger he becomes, which we get more punching in the face and so on. Does that make any sense to you? The haggle is a logical fallacy arrived at a large part because Tony Stark is an engineer and therefore he tried to engineer a solution the only way he know how, by building something. The resulting mayhem is one of the best seen in Avenger Age of Drone has situation tips from Pars with the collateral damage go a solution to specific problem. The Huckfest yet sword was super certificated, but it made for awesome scene. He just so darn likable. His addition to the MCO has provided some much needed low and made all the world ending thread. Likewise appear in Captain America Civil War provided a dose of laughter in an otherwise somber story and stole the story how the movies were seen. Unable to compromise his own via accord, Captain America and Iron Man are eventually guarded into the confirmation by Zemo. They initially come to a blows at the German airport in a SERP of hard nirvana as well. Superhero partake in a Royal Rumbles like your Battle Royal with their fleshy power on display. Ant-Man ting to a surprising new level by suddenly growing 60 foot tall, dwarfing the battlefield. Ant-Man toys with dim Iron Man. He throws them around while laughing many manically and joyful, destroying vehicle. In all honesty, it's a miracle. He did not kill anybody. Most of the characters were pulling punches. But Ant-Man was out here trying to curse people underneath. He saw his 100 boost. One of the reasons Captain America Winter Soldier is so beloved. It is finally delivered a Captain America that was truly a super soldier with emphasizes super. Up to that point, Carper seemed like a guy who was moderately stronger than more normal but was honestly kind of me. Winter Soldier changed that by showing just how to suggest stories. 5 minutes into the movie, he kicks a turret of a boat with such velocity that you have to assume the guy broke his neck when he hit the water. Avenger Sage Ultron carries that whole crab Avenger energy forward, which he'll hate, to an exciting encounter that is nonetheless a white silky way trying to prevent Ultron from absconding with a sleek new webdinium body. Cap finds himself isolated and Gaz an AI board after losing his shield in the encounter. Cap fight the only way he knows how, punching and kicking. Considering a drones is report, it does not seem like a good strategy though, and the point Cap tried to joke. I guess I forget that robot did not breath. It is still a great fight when Captain America once again finds himself in an elevator full of hydrogen. We think we know what's going to happen, and given this incredible elevator scene in Captain America Winter Soldier, we are excited to see it. However, film is just betting the artistices, setting up over expectation and then cleverly subverting them when Gap leans in toward Jasper St and say simply Hydra. We are as shocked as St look in one of the wildest and most unexpected turn in the Inku. Cap simply walk out taking the scapture without throwing a punch after getting Royal Storm by Kronos in the opening of infantry car, and to undertakes a heroic journey to find a weapon that can label the plate he built. His quest eventually takes him to be sane that constructed mission inner. Unfortunately, Toner's gling everyone and mamming the lone surviving drought, and it on the top of that the forget is out of order that is start for to takes on the full force of Star, and he somehow is not killed outright. Anyone else would be automized, but to come through hit with nothing worse than bad sunburn. He is scumble, eventually falling into a coma. Alred could be just bad guys of Descent Rock. It seems like maybe Chea will die after all. There is no allow and near as the disgust is a million mile away. Gouda sentient Ad-Man cuts off his arm and uses it for the handle of the magic axe crafted by the enormous Swarf. The axe brings sword back from the brink. This whole bloodline is just insanity. Loki spends most on the entire time of the Avengers willfully doing out punishment to this hero, often by painting the among one another. He's always one step ahead. Even when the Avengers have Loki under house arrest, as Nike Fury find out why do feel like he's the only person on his boat and didn't want to be here. Muse Manor can smell like crazy on Loki, but find himself on the receiving end of the joke when a dangerously out of control Hook enable Loki to escape. Therefore, when a certain control Hook later encounter Loki during the battle for New York, it's personal. Despite Loki's arrogant self-assurance in his goodhood, the Hulk makes quiet work for the Asian Prince swag, beating him against a groan like his dirty float mirror is absolutely comedic. Tip joining to all sorts left the sort of thing you would expect in a while. He cartooned the climax of Avengers Endgame finds Captain America holding a broken shield and standing alone in Garnos and his army. There is no quieting gap, but despite he is I can sell this order, it's clear the end is high. He will go down fighting what is going to go down, and turn Sam Wilson's and Tony Mackie appear to speak from the grave. On your left in movie history, few moment can stand shoulder to shoulder with a sportless scene of the end. Come far share a spectre suddenly. No matter movie can imagine game of 21 film build up, nor the characters of seeing almost every hero we have ever made return to stand behind the world Captain America, especially since many of these heroes had recently been dusted in Avengers Infinity War. The Avengers have been go to battle for a decade in the comic book through the iconic catchphrases Avengers Assemble, but Marvel Studios had for what held it for the film after the year 16 movies and some disappointing review and boxer performance of late. The DC Shin universe has officially come to an end with Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. Jen Momoa stars Aquaman for the summer term in his career. After 2 solo movies, a Justice League team-up and a handful of cameos, his first stand-alone movie, 2018's Aquaman, defied expectations and ended up making $1.15 billion at a worldwide box office, the highest-grossing DC movie ever. But this is likely Momoa's final cheering up as Aquaman. New DC Studio CEO James Gunn and Patrick Safran are rebooting the DC universe with 2025 Superman Legacy, with the plan to recast most of the major role that is not an Aquaman movie on the DC play they have revealed so far, meaning Lost Kingdom is most favor for now. If Gunn and Safran end up keeping any element of the current DCU, Lost Kingdom may have planted some new seed for the future. The first major development in the sequel is that a woman and his Atlantis queen Myra Amber have a baby who exits some of his spider's introverted power. The heroes, their duties are interrupted when opposed Black Manta. It resources to cause some global warming disasters with the ancient Black Trident artifact. Aquaman teams up with his reformed Butter or to stop Black Manga from resurrecting the zombie army of Necros and ancient underwater kingdom loss. In the end, the heroes are successful. Black Ma dies and Enema reveal the existence of Atlantis to the United Nations, hoping the Univiad civilization can be recognized as a supervision religion. Most superhero movies and nowadays use a post-Colosseum to tease what's coming next for the franchise. What would happen when his unmatic universe is coming to an end? In a case of Aquaman and DCO, the post-scene is the sequel back to an earlier joke during their travels together. Man tells Arm all about your wonders or surface wall like beer greasy burgers, and as a joke cockroaches, he makes home sample a cockroach and to his surprise, OM likes it. In number scene, OM sits at the restaurant, orders a burger, and adds a crunch cockroach. And with final test scene, the DCU comes to an end. But this is really Momoa's last role as a DC character. He reportedly held meeting with Grant to discuss the future in a new DC universe. I will be always Aquaman and not anyone coming in and taking. There might be some other character too. There have since been ran rumors that Momoa should play Lobo above alien bounty hunter who happened to share some reasonables with Momoa, but nothing has been confirmed and this chapter of the DCU closes. He's been open to surprise his original role that made him a household name. The truth of it is, if the Odyssey is Love Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, then there is a possibility, but right now I am like it's not looking too good. I love this character and I would want to play it for a long time. Momoa said, I kind of see where I would want you to go, and even in the next 10 days, years or so, there's a lot of cool things they can do and I do enjoy the role and the work. So, I just scrum too if people love it. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom has finally arrived, and with the book is now officially closed on the DCO. The DCX in the universe. A film began with A Man of Sail in 2013 and has since consisted of 15 feature films including Aquaman and Lost Kingdom. 16 review includes Zack Snyder, Justice League as its own film. Since the decision to start a new universe of movies came so abruptly, this new Command film does not even attempt to bring any sort of glory to its surrounding universe, which actually might be for depressive and clear ending to be character and stories within the realm of Aquaman. The finite finds a steady mythical Lost Kingdom of Negroes. It has been hidden the end trap within a magical spell placed by King Atlantis centuries ago. Archer Curie along with the Arm and King Nero. I have to stop Black Maya, who is trying to break the spell that holds the civil King Cordex at bay. Only someone within King Adlan's bloodline can break the spell. Knowing this is Black Macha kidnap Archer Curie's son Jr. and bring to Negroes. A massive battle ensues as his evil forces fab with the Negroes began awakening. Ajoa an attempt to defeat Black Mega and save Jura. Orm briefly grabs hold of the Black Trident, the evil weapon of King Cortex that was poisoning and possessing Black Magite. While holding the Trident, King Goddess then transfers his spirit to the arm and promises to return to him the power of Ocean Master if they join forces. Arta remains arm of the Flaming Word after murder Queen Atlanta and breaks the hold of Cortex. Following the defeat of Codex and dissection of Nereus, our heroes find themselves gathered on an iceberg. On having just been broken out of his imprisonment, had previously agreed to return to his cell after he have saved a world within approval of both Kingfish and King. Carter suggests that arm blow from A and he report him as that to Atlantis. Much of the drama in the beginning of the film revolved around Atlantis' reluctance to reveal themselves to the surface after the narration of the planet finally decided they need to work together with the surface in order to protect and help restore it. The film closes with a global press conference at UN and Archer Curie official annoyancing Atlantis and that it is final words spoken in the DCO. Archer, Myra and baby Archer Jr. live happily ever after. Atlantis agrees to come out of hiding and use their technology and resources used to enter the globe. A very near and tight conclusion to the Aquaman saga while also being a rider and sermon IOU's ending to DDC Extended Universe film. Spoiler alert, we are breaking John keep Lord point any ending of Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom ain't it no, so beware if you have noted seen if you watch the new Aquaman sequel and short wait there was it yep that it was a decade of DC movie ended with Patrick Wilson eating a charge burger with a rebooted cinematic universe on a heroism for 2025. Jason Momoa searing Tetra superhero has his final swim in Lost Kingdom, which finishes off the current DC era that had Marvel-size ambitions but never found consistent critical and Odyssey's love. So yeah, the movie was a lamjack of sort with no cool cameos or teases, but Aquaman still needed to save the world from a bad guy with a light of magical Joe Dad's commitment to the job before winning full super villain Black Ma get his hand on the magical Black Trident and becomes possessed by the spirit of Cortex, the evil ruler of the magical Lost Kingdom of Necros. He and his aqua zombies are frozen and turned in charge. Kitka and Munchel Aquaman's baby will be to use AK Royal Atlantis blood to break this spell-free Cortex and his undead board and unleash hell with the help of our brother or Wilson or Trumbull hero defeat the resurrected Godex and Manta far to his death as Negro Scamble in the aftermath man decided to go public with the existence of Atlantis, much like me is revealed at the end of the marvelous Black Puncher and a hero hold a new conference on Ali Island promising to work with the global nation to help solve the climate crisis. I am the King of Atlantis. I am Aquaman. He exclaimed. David MD drop a more Monroe version of Robot Journey Jr.'s I am Iron Man moment in Iron Man. After years and ex-husband Journey Dev's recent legal mess, she was almost fired from her role as Aquaman wife Mera and Hayden cut from the sequel, but she actually has a decent amount of Sakri Kid as a woman's mom at Lana. That said, Myra does not have to turn to do early on. She hangs around her husband PSY and ends up in the infirmary when Ma burns her badly. But near the final, Mira gets more involved in the action and saves her baby as Econ Cortex yourself. Yep. And while it's amazing, is certainly one of the more unconscious little ones in recent memory. As it pays off a joke from earlier in the movie where Aquaman tricks into eating to go and he ends up digging it and Kick is laying low since much of Atlantis is still right at him for his bad guy period 2018 and he parrots in various restaurant or sees a random cockroach walking on his table and puts it on a burger taking a bite and smiling due to its insect vest. Probably not new. DC Hanko Sam's Gunn and Ped Safran are not killing. Many of the actor Gunn has said Solo will return, but it's going to be new Batman as well as other hero. 2025 Superman Lee will start filling audited lineup starting with David Gratt as a later Superman as Louis and Eno as Lex Leo. Momo has the best chance of returning, likely not as Aquaman. Fans have long dreamed of him playing DC Cosmic Tirobo, Momo's favorite comic book characters, and one again in WG Violent Spirit to Marvel's Deadpool, and the actor himself would be incredible Dawn for playing him if they ever called me to ask me to play or ask him to audition. I am J. Momo said in recent Theo interview. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom is here at last, bringing out the final echoes of the sex ed center era of DC Comic B Sims and seemingly bringing a 10 years DC Extended Universe project To a rather underwhelming loss in a sequel to his 2018 surprise hit, director James Van reunite with most of the cast from the original, including Justin Momoa, Patrick Wilson, Nicole Kidman and Yahya Abdul-Mateen, for an underwater sci-fi epic of royal intrigue, terrifying monsters and plenty of guns in a way of Archer Gary's latest quest. He and his family that can't be undone well except by a few pants from Jay's gun of course, and yet of the cinematic style that seems distant to come in and wash away everything the past Aquaman films have accomplished. Momoa and Van have not closed the door on a third outing just yet. If they do get a chance to dive back into these admittedly murky, they certainly have quite ugly to reveal, piling his defeat at the hands of Aquaman in a first film. David Kenny in hellbent on repairing his black mega armor so that he may exact his revenge on the King of Atlantis. Fortunately, and with the help of marine biologist Dr. Stefan Shine, he uncovered the lost kingdom of Negroes frozen for eternity in the Aquatic by King Atlan, imbued with the superhuman physical abilities by Akar's Black Trident belonging to Naro's White Ruler, and Atlan's brother King Cortex can set out to free the forces of the Last Kingdom and earn power to kill Arthur Curry and his entire family. He began his quest by stealing and then burning an ancient environmentally destructive power source known as the emitting upper barrel amount of greenhouse gases that expedite climate change, and melting the lost kingdom of Necros out of his anarchic prison, Utter, who has sired a son with his wife Queen Mera. Since Aquaman becomes aware of Gan's plan after he attacks Atlantis and brings disgraced former Queen Ocean Master Or out of a desert prison to help track down and stop Black Ma, by the time they are able to break into his facility and learn of his full plan, it's too late. Ma has destroyed Archer's home to reverse King Atlan's spell and free Codex can to be blood of Atlantis family before he can sacrifice Archer's son. Have Archer and reunited with Mayor Atlana and the Queen Mo, King Naros the King and the forces of their respective lay made newly melted Negroes during their final battle. The spirit of Cortex uses Arm's hatred and resentment of Archer to corrupt him, and now imbued with the Trident power, Arm overpowers Archer and bloodies him on the sacrificial Archer as the ice imprisoning Cortex Archer and Orm vessel for the Trident. His influence is exploiting their negative feeling for one another. Arthur overcomes this while focusing on a memory of when he first met, later or set free by those present promise to presume him that so that it mean a quiet life among human. In a week that fellow Archer reveals Atlantis' existence to the surface world, secures representation within the United Nation and as a world to united the effect of the ongoing climate crisis is in the first Aquaman. While this used Black Puncher, then Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom is without question the Dark World, jokingly referred to Arm as Loki at one point during the film. Like in famously derived Mara sequel, the Lost Kingdom uses a larger conflict between two, one enjoying comfortable harmony, the other long since wrapped and hidden away, to mirror and ultimately reconcile a similar interpersonal conflict at the heart of the story. The Lost Kingdom is a bit more transparent in this regard, Torm and Fractured Brotherhood being nearly identical to Cortex and Alliance. The film's secret arguably failed to dive deep enough into the similarities and differences in this relationship to take full advantage of them. It could be inferred that Alters achieve factory in the end because, unlike Atlan, is able to find Janati with his brother, or hint as mirroring he is encouraging farewell to, in which he admit that's willingness to seek help from and cooperate with others snag him better for throne. Had given it to Cortex influences and chosen to fight Orm for the Trident, he would have either been empowered by Cortex and Arms combined, sent or corrupted by the Trident himself. Only by winning Arms, Butterhood is able to achieve lasting peace by dedicating Codex and the Necros. The majority of Equine and the Lost Kingdom can be read as a blatant allegorical play for global unity in the face of exentional climate crisis. James Venn uses the Tula Lost Kingdom of Neglis as a well-meaning if somewhat clunky metaphor for the appending thread with characters regularly an explicitly name-dropping buzzy concept like climate change, greenhouse gases and melting ice cap. But Codex and Monster of Necros can only be stopped by one complete political corporation. Just as no one version can stop the climate crisis, Arthur is unable to defeat Gordex and Black Ma without help from his allies and enemies alike. A crucial part of his journey is rebuilding his relationship with Arm, a man whose greatest weakness as a leader was his desire to destroy his enemies rather than work with them. Meanwhile, the Governing Council of Atlantis, who gave Aurum war power and a title of Ocean Master in the last film, have taken a stylish isolation stance in the face of environmental inhalation. Art must ultimately work around him to reveal Atlantis' existence and help lead up fight against climate change. Like many human who have spent a better part of their lives watching, politicians ignored ever-growing climate disaster in favor of personal economic and political interest. When seems anxious about what future show we continued on our current part at the same time he swims paint a hopeful aspirational picture of what the word could accomplish a work together in the face of Distra's Momo cameo in the past scene of The Flesh earlier this year. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom has basically no connection to wider DC Extended Universe's final moment. A new status quo from G-World at large. There's absolutely nothing to imply that this world is the same neighbor inhabited by any iteration of the Justice League, not even Zack Snyder, except for the tiny connection of Momo having played the same characters in a few films outside of this one as a duo-ology. James Van's Aquaman films essentially stand on their own. The Lost Kingdom is widely being heralded as the end of the DC, as is the final DC project starring a member of the Snyder Justice League cast and lost before James Gunn launches his DC universe with Superman Legacy. Cure Red of the room at DC and Warner Brothers pretty clearly empowered at Gunn and studio want a fresh start bearing any runaway box office they think they can still profit from, and despite being a sequel to the highest grossing DC outing, The Lost Kingdom is currently tracking to bomb even harder at the box office than the Marvel state. In short, there's essentially nothing in our road outside of the film that leads one to live a meaningful future await this series. Even so, Momo and Ven are keeping their mind open about the possibility of a third installment. In the weeks leading up to the release of Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, the elephant fish in the aquarium has been better or not the film would end James 1 and Jason's one more charm under the sea. While nobody expected either of them to come out and say it was definitive, and which would be like announcing on TV series is can-led week before a new season, it's still a bit surprising to hear them talk about the potential for more stories in this continuity. For Ben's part, he seemed to be treating the film as her own isolated universe that could be integrated into James Gunn's future discipline. As he explained to Above the Line, he sees his two films as linking place in this fantasy world that is not part of the greater DC universe and as hard beholden to any continuity past, present or future, when even appear cautiously optic about a third installment outlining to re-entertainment weekly his general hope of Archer's character arc. If and when films is did Momian became significantly more dubious about his future as a woman's, possibly due to Rubus that he may be caused as Lobo in Gunn's new universe. He told Entertainment Tonight that if success could earn him manager outing and that he is nobody hurry to leave the characters behind. The likelihood of this version of Aquaman somehow persisting in the new universe is not looking too good. An expert pilot and college best friend of the smartest man on Earth Game agreed to fly his pal Reed Richards' experimental rocket ship into outer space so it could be tested. In the end, the ship ultimately performed parrot brutal until its radiation shielding failed to protect his Q from the cosmic ray that transformed Ben into the ever-loving blue eye that trend has steadily increased ever since FGER mutation and a constant SRANT training. It's not known if there is a limit. So how strong they could become in the future. But he has not found it yet. During the Avengers vs X-Men comic book events in 2012, Ting actually managed to defeat Nema in a first fight while underwater. In Uncanny X-Men 12, Nema may be the strongest thing from disease, but sure is not the strongest thing in time any longer. X-Men does not always receive her flower. Even she is now one of the longest-serving member. A Professor X mutant Jim debuting in 1981's Avengers annual Jan Ro possess an interesting superpower. The protagonist of the series. The main protagonist of the Pirates theme show manga One Piece is an accompanying anime series whose greatest dream is alive is to become the next Pirate King. It's a dream that can only be realized if you manage to acquire the story's Megan, a fable treasure of immeasurable value acquired by the late great Pirate King. Gorge Rogers are too small and skinny. Luffy has a big heart and such as Armstrong-like powers that acquired after getting a devil fruit as a kid. Is with those power and his band of style that Luffy sets out on a going very far for seemingly endless ting of adventure that involves everything except acquiring the actual One Pieces. Luffy is all about good food and friendship, making him an honest and extremely likable protagonist. Our decor of the One Piece limb he become a respected pirate captain. What some more One Piece has been praised for his representation. Luffy and his crew resonate particularly well with female and audiences compared to their show of the star. He may not be star of the finest and fur, but he's a fan of favor nonetheless. Arge play job with a Bron Fedro play appear to be just a regular celibate, but he's also a brilliant multitasker with a double's life as a secret agent for the old Wukar and his forever sneaking off to the countless secret tunnel that lead to the top secret layer under his Dom. Kimir play Dom to his family, but Pa play is incredible smart unlike any good spy. His a vortex to a plura of M gadget, but despite all of his Skill and secret are the end of the day. He's totally chilling with his family, and it's hard not to love him for that. The start of the comedy sci-fi show Dexter's Laboratory. Dexter leads a double life strike under his parent noses with a secret science lab in his basement. Will be big grown glasses, purple gloves, a white lab coat and ginger girl. They still spend his time getting up to some serious how super genius he speak with an inexorable Russian's accent despite living in a superan America. The series is credited with invoking the complex and cinematic modern animation style that would later inspire series like The Powerpuff Girl and Fairy Odd Parents. According to Sci-Fi Wire, the ultimate emotement of K or Japanese world, usually translated as cute. Hello Kitty is a simple sweet character that Gen X girl fell in love with back in the late 1970s. The popularity of this hyper-marketable cat-like character would only grow through the air, with many of her D-head fan having never even seen a Hello Kitty cartoon. But his make perfect sense for her character that began life as something mean to accentuate a Vinigo pursue. Our Kitty's design is somewhat basic. There is something only charming in the simple shape of her face. Since her original creation, the iconic Oshi Cutie has become the de facto of cutest Japanese-inspired fashion aesthetic and grace countless dish for girl chains and even grown adult. What many of these people may not realize is that there's been over a dozen animated Hello Kitty series dating back to 1987, when the Japanese-American to production Hello Kitty's fury that tail theater hit TV screen, with her signature being Van Year. Louis Bella is our most beloved member of the Belkas family on board. The 9-year-old sibling to Jan and Jenna is smart, sneaky, and always ready with snappy commentary. She's also kind of intense and just a little bit terrifying, prepare to throw down at a moment notice as to why she always wear numerous fan theories about. In an interview with the A-Club Animator Loan of his year, you get a little consecutive distances which experiences both as a little girl and Bunny Bugs Bunny at the same time. And of course, as anyone who has been seen with the vaulting arc and Atlas little kid just look cute with animals earn with dad. The DCU is officially dead. Has been added by DVD strolling on Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. We can finally close a book on what has been one hell of a roller coaster ride, and in the end what is worth it now as a one person's own side who has been crunching almost everything this year related since I first joined. I think one can safely say that the only people who are going to miss this field exam of a cinematic universe are going to be exact Snyder fan. But even then they are too busy having an equally indatic universe that they cannot wait to talk about in any future. Still, in a year that gave us 4 DC film. Does it really mean anything when I say that Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom is a best of jammer? At the very least, Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom knows what it is and does his job competently for whatever's worth at this point, says somebody after this first movie. Arthur Curry has settled into a comfortable life as a King of Atlantis. By day he is trying to handle the problem that a kingdom faces, and by night he goes back to the surface to take care of his newborn son. However, Black Manta has returned to seek vengeance against Aquaman and has the power of Black Trident on his side. What is the Black Trident? Well, is a relic of Atmia's lost kingdom that is slowly corrupting him and encouraging him to let out thousands of fear. All he relied on killing Aquaman and destroying the world, so clearly he needs to be stopped, but Aquaman can't do it alone. So he will be near to be his Trikal brother arm out of jail to add in stopping Ma and saving both the land and sea. Not much has seen the presentation was from the original film back when it was released in 2018, if you like the pure spectacle of the first movie. While there is imitatingly less of that here as the film out to focus more on characters' development, words is still affected and gets the job done. Whenever you will feel like the energy is starting to die down, an eviction scene is ready to pop in and you back into detention. There is not a whole lot to distinguish this, and he often recycle a lot of dumb same element. Black uses his laser agent robot attack. Aquaman bum rushes someone, but recycled action beards are hardly the worst sign as action movie can commit to NO. What is a big sign is that you can't tell that Echo Man and Lost Kingdom had been edited to hell and back outside of some very wide solo implemented in a handful of scene. The movie's overall structure just F the big Lord jump occur right at the beginning of the climax meet to establish this tag. If she touches anyone with her beard skin, she can absorb real life force and power temporarily. However, if she lushes on far too long, it may become more permanent. This was the case when Ro encountered Mrs. Marvel's Ika Carol John while part of the discordant battles against MS Marvel and observes all of her power and memories, making her exceptionally strong, near invisible, and giving her the ability to fly. If that is not enough, she also comes into contact with Wonder Man, another Marvel's powerhouse, and receive his Super Satano. In later year, Dan the Living Delight out of the Royo in 2006. Mrs. Marvel turn Royo is not prepared as he only tried to help Dan Ward when she gets sucked. That being said, Marvel's official website lists Rokio as being a stronger than Denver. So consider their knockout moment, Hieroi Tree. Unfortunately for the Thinking and Ro, they still have a long way to go if they ever hope to catch up the next hero. Excuse us on our over list. In 1979, Sashi Hawk won when a gunshot wound Force Fuse to give her a blood transformation in order to save her life. The producer succeeded. Jennifer found that she could transform into the She-Hulk. Not as strong as her cousin, she was able to retain both her intelligence and her sense of self while in Hulk mode. Her trend has fluctuated over the years. But like many others on this list, she's steadily grown stronger since her creation in 2004. She-Hulk, she effortlessly lifted the things with lifting machine at his maximum setting but with one hand. In the same issue, she had to throw on arm wrestling with Hercules in order to spare his willing. More recent stories like Immortal Hulk have shown Southeast Hulk began to close in her cousin's level of strength when an infant girl was rocked to the earth to save him from Grave Jones' destruction. His 15-year-old cousin eventually joined her older cousin in his fight for truth and justice as Supergirl, and she's still a teenager. She's one of the single most powerful people on the planet. Various stories throughout the year like the Season 2 show Supergirl Final. Nevertheless, she persisted on the CW have the Supergirl is might be or will become stronger than Superman. But in the comic where she is still currently teenager, that is not in the case. Many people don't realize this is Joan Jones, the monster from Mars. In one of DC Comics' most powerful superhero. In addition to possessing addition of a gamma bomb, Dr. Bluesman found himself transformed into a more known. Only the detail of the pair's static relationship might change, but at the end of the day superhero comic book save one unbreakable rule: Superman might be strong enough to move planet or bench press a full weight of the Earth's core, but even he is inhuman. Strength has its limit, Hulk does not. It's a famous superhero equation: the major Hulk gets the stronger he gets and there is a no end to it. When Bruce Banner transforms, the Hulk you fight and the more he fight, the angrier and the stronger he gets. It's a exclusive law, a self-fulfilling prophecy that ensures that his fears of a trend. Hulk will always come out and stop, with one notable exception. After a particle experiment turns on into Dr. Man, he receives special abilities that blossoms him into an unstoppable celestial entity introduced in the 1986 Washman. Manin holds the Leandre list, a power including super sedent, telepet, teleportation, flight, and immortality. What's particularly scary about his ability is how he can arrowless and disgrade someone instantly without too much fur or consequences. If Mansion woke up tomorrow and decided to needed a rest, he would not need an infinity glide to wipe away 50% of humanity. And he could do it before the first gap of coffee kicks in. And the skill that he possesses is the ability to look into the past, present and future and even change the fabric of reality. Something he had during the Flashpoint event, which resulted in the creation of New 52 branch of DC Universe. Truthfully, only the surface level of his power has been scratched in the comic. It's a good thing that he is dried of humanity and prefer to chill out with only his utard of company, otherwise he could be greatest threat an art has ever seen. These days are so many great animated shows and movies aimed at age that plenty of folk still turn to cartoon as they inspire from the real world. Animation is a modern art form. It can be a commenting on society and a way of understanding the world, giving viewers or opportunity to see themselves in those colorful characters. But unlike live-action shows, cartoon characters often live in word of boundaries possibility, creating a fertile space of exploring complex idea, dabbling in the absurd and parading subject that might be too sensitive to cover elsewhere. No matter how old viewers are or what generation they were born in, most have fond memories of cartoon that made an impression on them during their formative year. From early cartoon like to iconic Disney villain like Ursula, everyone has their favorite. After considering everything from cult falling to culture impact, we're ranking the 6 best cartoon characters of all time for generation of cartoon lover. The phrase being Pink Banter instantly go to mind iconic handy CH music with simply simple animation style and trippy stories. The series is a visual odyssey, one of the simple cartoon character on the list. Pink Panther is a pink cat with yellow eyes, a British accent and occasionally a teeny robe. The series would be rebooted in the 1990s during Mad Fur and featuring a more intense version of the mechanism. The Pink Panther is often curious but executes a laid-back attitude, making him the ultimate cool cat. This combination of trait lands him in a some pretty doggy scenario, from haunted house to a Wonderland-esque. One of the things that make the Pink Panther great is his release on Panto Man, which gives him plenty of opportunity for hilarious cartoon physics and surrealism. Originally airing the 1960s, Speed Racer is an anime adopted from Testo Japanese manga. By it premiered on ABC in the United States and would become one of the earliest anime to become popular stateside. While the dubbing is a bite of mess with a hilariously fast dialogue, the series is a pretty straightforward adventure. Not even 2 minutes after that woman explained why need to be a snack out of jail, he suddenly free do a lot of heavy free lifting just to keep the plot moving, and you can pretty easily tell that this movie had free resh where they are trapping to fix problem within the film rather than trying to make the films line up with whatever hull was happening elsewhere in Nisio. I think James Glenn and James Benny eventually threw their hands up in the air. Sad secured and just felated to be done with the whole project. That's a bit negative reading of the situation to be sure, but can you blame them? It's almost impossible to talk about Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom without first acknowledging the mess that DC put themselves in. Now a movie that is not all that bad has been put out to be dire when it really does not deserve that. You can tell that there is at least some effort being put into it by the cast member. Yahya Abdul-Mateen is an excellent villain, going all in, just being a dislikable person until the very end. Jess's Momus due to gross may get odd to some pretty quickly, but when paired with the Patrick Wilson stick in a MMON, it's a strangely works. Patrick Wilson is probably the weakest of the three lead, as he does seem pretty miscast in a superhero blockbuster, but at least know not to be take what's happening here too seriously and is not afraid to make a fool of himself. Admitted at least they films really does wreck hard up the stupidity when compared to the first film in a way that's supreme. The villain manipulating Black Ma is a cross between a powerbonga villain and a caption planet whose goal is basically to destroy the world via pollution. The film's beating the drum about protecting the Earth and stopping global warming. But any message the film may have is kind of ruined by now. Quickly it undermined the seriousness of the suggestion. For instance, Aquaman makes one-arm cockroaches while taking about the choice of eating Pysoid after arriving at the villain's base, which is then volcano shooting green toxic film into the sky. That is almost nostalgic. Stupidity does reach a boiling point by the climax where just throws everything in kitchen sink, but none of this check with so different villain that man has to swap with plenty of medical city to boot. You can feel the film's trying to wrap itself up as quickly as possible and jams and logic in its pursuit of getting things the hell ever. It's not as bad or as blatant as other this effort, but by the end you just feel worn out and want a film to wrap up. I think this is because Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom does not really introduce anything new to the franchise and is just reusing the same character in different ways. There are hardly any new addition here other than changing the character dynamic, and it does resolve itself in a way. I'm glad that we wasn't a boss Garrison that tried to deal this was to come, since we all know there is nothing after this. Aquaman and Lost Kingdom does set up areas that a sequel could explore, but it feels like a pretty and definitive ending for his character, and I am okay with that. If there is a demand for a Aquaman movie, I would be okay with it, since this franchise's batting average has been fine at best. And yes, Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom is over to slightly worse than the predecessor, but that's mostly because it does not really attempt to do anything new video premises than putting the same cast in slightly different situation. They still manage to have some fun here, and I did find myself enjoying the film at them. But I can't say I am going to look back with wasteful Nostia Man movies. They were good at just being basic action movie, and that's about it. They were entertaining and in for of superhero stuff, which should be viewed somewhat favorable after the past years has said. I didn't actively hate my term with this movie. I wasn't bored tears by it, and I wasn't confused at what purpose of it was. Everything about Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom was evidently clear. It wanted to be a simple action movie just like the first movie, but was able to slightly weaker because it was not as fresh. I respect that it reached the goal and did not have its eyes set on the room moon. Maybe that's a lesson that DC can learn moving forward. Sometimes it's okay to be competent and ambitious. Sometimes it's okay to just be stupid and try to have fun. Chas Mew Aquaman and Lost Kingdom has sold partner $400 million milestone at the global box office. The sequel, directed by James Mann, has established herself as the most successful DC Extended Universe release since the original Command in 2018. Initially, its debut over the Christmas period seemed underwhelming with a 4-day weekend of $14 million. However, Tyre joined forever for Aquaman, which has surpassed the earning of last summer The Law Flesh $271 million and Giant Johnson's Black Adam, despite the deduction indicator count from the film's ad inventor $2.82 $82 million over recent weekend. The movie availability on digital perform since Tuesday financial $1 million or purchase $24 million offers fans alternative viewing option, further grossing financial success. Notably, Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom will conclude its theatrical run as the 7th highest grossing film in a now concluded DCO saga. This universe has witnessed its share of less successful venture, including recent releases like Shazam Fury of Decor and Flash and Blue Vital. The production budget of Foreman Show was substantial to $15 million plus a figure that encompasses additional photography, but exchange discloses market cost. The film's performance has sparked discussion among his interesting insider and fans alike. Dolan Green, 1 star, expressed his initial disappointment with changes made during production during its interview with Comic Book. He said the shift from the original script and cut that he believed had a significant potential. I was disappointed for the movie just because I thought the original secret was great and the original cut. I saw a little bite of it. It was really good. So I did not see my reason to start reshooting and reshaping the story, which obviously led to disappointment in a movie and not just me looking forward. Warner Brothers has an exciting lineup of DC film. Warner Brothers. Upcoming release: Future Joker for his day on October 4th. 2024, followed by James Gunn's Superman Legacy on July 11, 2025, and a Batman part on October 3, 2025. In the Warner Brothers pipeline are several projects still waiting for release date, including The Authority, The Brave and the Bolder, Batman Report in DCO, Supergirl, Women of Tomorrow, and Swimming, Jess's Mom, Patrick Wilson, Ye Abdul Machino and Umber lead a remarkable cast in Aquaman and Lost Kingdom, spotted by Renal Park, Dolph Lundgren and Naikwa Kidman. The film highlight had the enduring fascination with superhero narrative and a capability of sequel to not only match but sometimes surpass achievement of their predecessor. Jason's achievement and so over the dish's talent in a captivating odyssey around her world, distinct blend of action-packed drama and mythological storytelling for your years after the events of Aquaman. Archer Curry is King of Atlantis, married to Maya and has a son with her. However, Jay can, despite for revenge against Aquaman, searches for its ruin of a lost civilization in Antarctica. When Jay finds the Black Trident that can communicate with his creator, who promises to give the villain the power to kill Aquaman and his family. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom had a call struck against it. Warner Brothers have announced they are going to reboot their DC movie properties with Superman Legacy and Reboot and Helicopter. The release of the films had been delayed for a year because of reshoot and due to the highly published Dab Here rumor that a production was looking to cut Amber Heard's role as much as possible before the famous release. He released a statement that she was persecuted on set, which Warner Brothers have refuted. Any people who seemed dejected. Mom knows there won't be any more Aquaman movie. This year of any negativity has led to Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom pre-release ranking being worse than the Marvel. The box office has been terrible and reviews have ranged from mash to waffle and independent. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom was a review. Many gritties seem to be out to give Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom a kicking a right to load of water-based pan. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom was not even the worst film in the DCIO that Dishness goes into first studio scale film. Aquaman in the Lost Kingdom big issue was his derivative nature. It was a mix of ideas and plot from other franchises. James Mann was trying to make Aquaman into an underwater star due to all the underwater laser battle and Aquaman and or meeting Java Doib's underwater cousin. There was a vital flood of rings and Nashi Lovecraft cosmic horror due to the last civilization and a black TR having a corrupting influences like the One Ring from Lord of Any Horus from the Harry Potter. Aquaman even referred to Harry Potter and a prisoner of a Sakban, and Chica's arm was locked in a prison guarded by Moses, and your brother with affections relationship were forced to go on quiz together. Okay, fine. The haters win the DCU enjoy because if Aquaman Lost Kingdom is their idea of good movie, I am not sticking up for it anymore. I got laid of his mouth, and watching this movie was still the least enjoyable experience. I have had a whole holiday season. It's been a long time since I have seen a new film. Let alone a new superhero film that offers so engrossingly little in terms of story, soul charm, dedication, or even basic technical merit. I don't even like the first Aquaman, but it's looking like a masterpiece now compared to this. Hell, the Flesh is looking pretty good compared to this. This review is going to pretty much just be so rant. So, let's rant. Aquaman and Lost Kingdom sees Jason Momoa return as Archer Curry, who ruling Atlantis while also raising his newborn son on land. But David Kang, whose father was left to die by Arthur in the last film, is back somehow. I am using it happen in a credit scene, but they don't care enough to get up and still want to wins. So he gathers a team to seek out Atlantan artifacts and find a Black Trident that horses the soul and memory of an evil god, forcing out her to dream up with his disgraced half-brother to find and stop him. But really the blood does not matter. Its only purpose is to get a Form 1 loud bombastic action scene to the next, and will be sequence a film want to take a breath for more than 30 seconds. If you were to look at the story outlined on surface, you would find plenty of potential. But their surface isn't deep as a woman and the Lost Kingdom is willing to go before banging its paws and pan in your face or sporting some meaningless glass. The pacing is so fast and leaves it character so paper that they got none help but seeing about how much of the original cut was left in the ocean trench that is a cutting room floor. Characters who have rich histories with each other have a green chemistry that are people who just met, and every introduction to them and a reaction to the family faces showing up are just as quick and insignificant. Gan suddenly has a leg when I follow the subbing with no explanation, but even if the existence were restored, I don't know how much better Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom would be. It still suffers from the first simul identic glasses, not knowing whether it want to be goofy suspenseful or totally irinty. The lux sound like it was written for and end by a 12 years old sucking, and he all charmed that Jason's mom is so clearly trying to bring the role everyone also is doing the bare minimum to not be flat out awful, with his sole exception of Patrick Wilson as all he is only consistency good part of the film, nailing the character's comedic timing, reaction to ludicrous moment, and shift to a more honorable attitude. The story of Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom could have had promise. It scores. The culture is still littered with comic book movie drops and modified that they have officially grown very sick of hordes of faceless smoke that are not really outread because of main character's invincibility, world-ending sake that are just background noise and clearly won't have any lasting consequences. Characters about to be killed but getting saved at the last second. Thus both main bad guys' action being influenced by some girl's object that channels another darker fears that Lost Rob would not so be bad if Dando did not Van's motivation of Revan accomplish that goal. He ultimately become just a fool for a much less interesting villain with much less interesting plan. And even his mental corruption is not that interesting or creepy to watch because that would require some focus on the psychology of his character. But we can't do that because either director James Van or Warner Brothers are apparently determined to prove Martin sources right about comic book movies even as cinematic junk food. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom does not taste good because the film is often hideous to look at. The effect were often unconvincing in the first film, but the world's design and color scheme were heavily weaved and wonderfully shot. Here everything looks washed out, that one was not on purpose and muted, and even the exact same setting we saw in the first Aquaman have lost their scene of mythical scale and detail. If you have seen a big fantasy film, you have seen better version or what Aquaman and the Last Kingdom has to show you. I was honestly amazed by how few action sequences do in a way, and I had to actually stop my eyes from glazing over in distance. There is one dynamically short fight between the Archer hand near the end, but the rest of the action is theater or just blindfold. The CGA looks as fake as the first film, but rejoy letters on cinematography to balance it out when a comic book movie or really any movie is lacking in substance. The bigger crime it can commit is not being at least well crafted or visually interesting, since it video Man of Sale even 10 years ago. The DCU has gotten a lot of lag that I don't think is always dissolved. It's had problem, but I have defended from term to term for a few years, was even very pleased with the very where it was going, but in 2023 is out from some of the most magical or forgettable material that I have seen in the recent blockbuster landscape. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom is the final film in the DCO before rebooted entirely, and it seems very apparent to me that people in Stars only cared about getting the movie done and checking it out. So whole continuity can be over with. Yvonne Brothers really did have the mindset toward this, and the years of DC this film that paint a very sad picture where it said is that one had come to be blockbuster in general. I send a message that if a film is not getting a sequel and is not part of a universe that's going to continue, then it's not worth making as good as it can be. If Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom is exactly the film that included make, then I can only say that their priorities clash with what I want as a viewer and leave it as bad. But whatever the intention were from anyone, this is one of the worst superhero movie I have ever seen. Is nothing more than a hollow mask that represent everything wrong with big studio film and a comic book genre in the entirely. Aquaman and the Last King Jam could hit $45 million for this 4J holiday weekend, or might have last staying power through Christmas Day, or finish closer to $40 million. Every little bite has and will give us better indications of previously how well or howly the film will play going forward. But regardless of this box office outcome, Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom is a good final character in the DCU saga. Not great, but certainly enough we aren't to justify a big success jumped ahead. Unless the sequel can lag out even better than its predecessor and top to $50 million, which would guarantee a final of $1,500 million, assuming watching in a national sport at minimum. More likely in that scenario would be a $750 million global total, avoiding a disaster and at least sending the DCU on a blockbuster's note rather than a known event. But even this would be a massive cumjohn from the 2017 Aquaman, which banged $1.15 billion at Panto holiday scenario. That's just enough to generate positive headline for solid year and finish, and combine with the Barbie and a couple of well-performing moderate successes, provide over far bigger truth about how hard 2023 ahead studio, particularly WBD and his name Premiere, should overperform for Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. So those figures come in validator code and should base on potential, then it will be a good sign for Lost Kingdom long-term prospect of hitting the high end of potential box office outcome. The problem is nothing really suggests we should expect a high-end outcome for Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. The Vermaic box office opening is bad enough, but is the Odyssey's reaction viewer gave it a we grade via SMA score, and while be good, it also means word of M is too weak to expect stronghold or much repeat business. Deep Love Plus is where a film can drive either way with the Orises, and a negative is where hold and longer legs are expected. My guess is Aquaman and the Lost Kingdoms, they'll enjoy the year and holiday booster through the first week of January. I'd have to give it perhaps a 3x or even 4x final domestic multiplier. Wrapping aboard's 1 star for the final global cherry, a $450 million higher, and it could $700 million if it surprises, or bass lower and it add $400 to $50 million is probably more likely a potential outlet result within the 6 films statically released, including Zack Snyder Justice League as a sapper film from the critical version. Lost Kingdom needs only about $202 million to be in the shared superhero universe top 10 box office progress to make the top half as Gosser. It needs only about $365 million, but Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom will need not have $655 million to break into the real top grossing tier of DCU film. From the 2013 through 2017 5 years era, when the films were generating a far better box office than the subsequent 5 years when not a single DCO to so far managed to reach even $400 million, the sold for top 5 ranking in the DCU will be close to $750 million to beat Societe 2016 $450 million. I figure I don't think Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom has much chance of attending. Aquaman in 2017 was the last film from the original plan for the DCU, and everything that came after was produced during a period of shifting studio leadership with avert changing priorities, continual studio executive interference in creative decision and in this leadership in general, such as undermining Watcher by approving thing he rejected in DCOU project under his supervision, and a direct lie resulting brutal don't turn in Odyssey's opinion and box office. He ultimately become just a fool for a much less interesting villain with much less interesting plan. And even his mental corruption is not that interesting or creepy to watch, because that would require some focus on the psychology of his character. But we can't do that because either director James Van or Warner Brothers are apparently determined to prove Martin sources right about comic book movies even as cinematic junk food. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom does not taste good because the film is often hideous to look at. The effects were often unconvincing in the first film, but the world's design and color scheme were heavily weaved and wonderfully shot. Here everything looks washed out, that one was not on purpose and muted, and even the exact same setting we saw in the first Aquaman have lost their scene of mythical scale and detail. If you have seen a big fantasy film, you have seen better version or what Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom has to show you. I was honestly amazed by how few action sequences do in a way, and I had to actually stop my eyes from glazing over in distance. There is one dynamically short fight between the archer Han near the end, but the rest of the action is theater or just blindfold. The CGI looks as fake as the first film, but rejoy letters on cinematography to balance it out when a comic book movie, or really any movie, is lacking in substance. The bigger crime it can commit is not being at least well-crafted or visually interesting, since it video Man of Sale even 10 years ago. The DCU has gotten a lot of lag that I don't think is always dissolved. It's had problem, but I have defended from term to term for a few years, was even very pleased with the very where it was going, but in 2023 is out from some of the most magical or forgettable material that I have seen in the recent blockbuster landscape. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom is the final film in the DCO before rebooted entirely, and it seems very apparent to me that people in Stars only cared about getting the movie done and checking it out. So whole continuity can be over with. Yvonne Brothers really did have the mindset toward this, and the years of DC this film that paint a very sad picture where it said is that one had come to be blockbuster in general. I send a message that if a film is not getting a sequel and is not part of a universe that's going to continue, then it's not worth making as good as it can be. If Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom is exactly the film that included make, then I can only say that their priorities clash with what I want as a viewer and leave it as bad. But whatever the intention were from anyone, this is one of the worst superhero movie I have ever seen. Is nothing more than a hollow mask that represent everything wrong with big studio film and a comic book genre in the entirely. Aquaman and the Last King Jam could hit $45 million for this 4J holiday weekend, or might have last staying power through Christmas Day, or finish closer to $40 million. Every little bite has and will give us better indications of previously how well or howly the film will play going forward, but regardless of this box office outcome, Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom is a good final character in the DCU saga. Not great, but certainly enough we aren't to justify a big success jumped ahead. Unless the sequel can lag out even better than its predecessor and top to $50 million, which would guarantee a final of $1,500 million, assuming watching in a national sport at minimum. More likely in that scenario would be a $750 million global total, avoiding a disaster and at least sending the DCU on a blockbuster's note rather than a known event. But even this would be a massive cumjohn from the 2017 Aquaman, which banged $1.15 billion at Panto holiday scenario. That's just enough to generate positive headline for solid year and finish, and combine with the Barbie and a couple of well-performing moderate successes provide over far bigger truth about how hard 2023 ahead studio, particularly WBD and his name Premiere, should overperform for Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. So those figures come in validator code and should base on potential, then it will be a good sign for Lost Kingdom long-term prospect of hitting the high end of potential box office outcome. The problem is nothing really suggests we should expect a high-end outcome for Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. The Vermaic box office opening is bad enough, but is the Odyssey's reaction viewer gave it a we grade via SMA score, and while be good, it also means word of M is too weak to expect stronghold or much repeat business. Deep Love Plus is where a film can drive either way with the Orysses, and a negative is where hold and longer legs are expected. My guess is Aquaman and the Lost Kingdoms, they'll enjoy the year and holiday booster through the first week of January. I'd have to give it perhaps a 3x or even 4x final domestic multiplier. Wrapping aboard's 1 star for the final global cherry, a $450 million higher, and it could $700 million if it surprises, or bass lower and it add $400 to $50 million is probably more likely a potential outlet result within the 6 films statically released, including Zack Snyder Justice League as a sapper film from the critical version. Lost Kingdom needs only about $202 million to be in the shared superhero universe top 10 box office progress to make the top half as Gosser. It needs only about $365 million, but Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom will need not have $655 million to break into the real top-grossing tier of DCU film. From the 2013 through 2017 5 years era when the films were generating a far better box office than the subsequent 5 years when not a single DCO to so far managed to reach even $400 million, the sold for top 5 ranking in the DCU will be close to $750 million to beat Societe 2016 $450 million. I figure I don't think Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom has much chance of attending. Aquaman in 2017 was the last film from the original plan for the DCU, and everything that came after was produced during a period of shifting studio leadership with overt changing priorities, continual studio executive interference in creative decision and in this leadership in general, such as undermining Watcher by approving thing he rejected in DCOU project under his supervision, and a direct lie resulting brutal don't turn in Odyssey's opinion and box office. For Rio probably contributing to broader Odyssey's distaste for superheroes movies, along with the Sony Spider-Man forum Venom Ledger born during the same past 2017 period. That may sound me, but I don't intend to it way. I personally still liked most of event weaker performance in DCU movies, even while recognizing they did not offer what audiences one can expect to earn their ticket for dollar when they have to choose just a small handful of film from hundreds every year. But at this point it's easy enough to see how passionate combo of reactionary studio choices and artistic uncertainty led to those films mostly underwhelming in storytelling and thus flopping. Whether is too late or not for the equipment sequel to recover and add at least a final moment of collective enjoyment of the DCU, is it right off into the sunset? We will find out soon enough when we have to full worldwide box office data for the weekend. Adel Baying's own whether Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom suffered the same paragot motivate AES and other as a previously co-release, to which audiences have thus far replied with a B grade, probably a case of that overseas viewer for myself. I think B is probably the correct grade, but I also think a B grade is not alright here, should not be as bad as it apparently is for most, is contextual sure, but a B level action-packed visual spectre on par with the best summer popcorn releases in live-action family-friendly superhero cartoon storytelling delivered at Christmas on the BS again. Possible is a sort of eye candy escapism I can get behind. Plus, if you need some messaging, it reminds you that melting the planet with understanding global warming is bad and probably going to get a sale if we don't stop being lazy and seeking ship feel-good solution that requires a little or no actual change in behavior or consumption. And we do get a bite of unpreparenting moment early on, plus a emotional sake of writing the hero's family. Plus a villain driven by revenge over the loss of his own family. Plus a brother team-up that reverses everything about the first relationship and characterization in X for some siblings neighboring. But all of that gets surface-level attention, and I'm satisfied that it exists within the film. So the story can get to what is made for, and that is running a grown reward from one action set pieces to another full of strange creatures and imitable brightly colored CGI fires. Your mileage may vary, but is what nothing that a loudy for sec, which I will never try are pointing out, is basically exactly the film I described wanting several year earlier. I don't suggesting Momo setting, and so I was happy to revisit that world and do those character even in a lighter and less inspiring story, and with far less emotionally effective work in a more crowded marketplace of those other goods or great films. Dan Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom might be a charter even to me, but directly James Van is one of the best at what he does, and he gets everyone's entertainment value and excitement out of it. There's a ton of CJ and action. Lost Kingdom plays all of the greatest hit from the first one. If the selection were made based on words Lotus and Easy as for your receives to sing along in those ways, then if you are going to pay to see movies at premium theater, then it should probably be a film like Aquaman and Lost Kingdom, which levers that doors for me to be best. I signed a Holy Cinema personal favorite choices for viewing. So I got to see Lost Kingdom with amazing tree on eye-popping visual gorgeous color. The car started returning in fun form. Mom's modern to the surfer dude mixed with biker dude W loves considerably more often and reminds us why his superhero business is also easy for him. Patrick Wilson is per4. But his personally stoned down to slightly creepy. No pun intended answers a bad misunderstood in his I should be a ruler and destroy all who challenge me perspective. It's what happened with Loki and follows a frustrating trend in superhero movie lately to try to redeem every villain as quickly as possible. Luckily Vision is good enough and the team up fun enough that we usually don't mind overlooking these problems long enough to enjoy the expa. But the film is a big priestly because it misses so many great opportunities as an effort to save away characterization and repper in favor of foster pacing and action sequences. This is a perpetually recurring but entirely false impression in Hollywood, thinking goddesses want is more of the spectral and effects and that it shows short comedy expense of characters and an emotional state, but reaction is really enough to sustain without enough investment in a character and in their journey. More about if a sec film go to in a character storytelling it was missing in the sequel and what would have it delivered into their dream range. The best part of entire film is Ye Abdomen is Black Ma. He's born villain with higher aspiration and every time he is on screen again, I was reminded of why I love the Aquaman world so much. The secondary villain Cortex is honestly no match for Abdul's machine sneering anger and serves certainly that he will kick every bird that gets in his will. What's missing in better examination of Black Maya being Poe in different direction by Cortex with competing voices in his head weighing for control and power. Umber Heard and I Go Man get some supporting kiss and show up in a few key moments to participate in action suspected and save the day, but he is definitely neglected to a smaller role this time around since then as Aquaman's sidekick inherently displays here, but I hope made us much more limited role wasn't a story reaction to the weird toxicity among segment of obsessively hostile hateful and most dialectic system. Unfortunately, I'm not anymore to give benefit of the doubt to studio leadership at this point. As was not under Garn's hand, Severin supervision, and was more affected by WBD Everight. Daniel Park made the most of his term as Dr. Shin and gets more of an arc with sporting subtext to walk him through his evolving perspective than anyone else in the film. It's an odd choice to place the King of Atlantis redemption on Park's scene. While mostly relying on a few award moment and brief dialogue accent to redeem Wilson's or Eka, but that's indicative of why Lost Kingdom somehow is essentially a form with just enough to feel fun, too little to care much about it all. Find it far end. If you enjoy the first Aquaman you will probably like Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, even it will feel like a slim dawn continuation of the film is a settled couple of linging or canon tying things up and giving you one last trip around trying to admire the cool visual. It won't bring as much emotional satisfaction and everything shine just a biteless, but it's the last chapter of the DCU to try to at least remind us one last it was like when we still cared and good still have a good charm in this world of superheroes. It was a bumpy ride out and at long last we finally have James Van Aquaman, and the Lost Kingdom Archer Curie may have taken his place as King of Atlantis, but the lingering threat of Black Ma. It means he must seem a brother or M to protect the Seven Seas. Sounds like a GR setup for animated hilarious talk. Ragnar Square sibling dream upright but not without a lot of cover. Sometime when a TV pilot does not do its job of grabbing your attention you will hear that you need to watch a few episodes before things get good. The first 30 to 45 minutes of Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom are the cinematic equivalent of this phenomenon. Movies sometimes take a little while to get going. Sure. But there's a bite more than story is showing going on here. The first sequel Man and much of Lost Kingdom work because while it's not the best movie, just Momo is having the charm of his life. So the audiences has fallen fun too. Let me tell you, the show does not feel like Momo is having the time of his life in the first act. Once you get past that fresh slog through, things get fun for a stretch. Or Archer have the exact brothers dynamic you would expect, which is quite a few funny moments thanks to Wilson's and Mom's own second. They are the heart here, as was VS intent from the beginning. None of this came at expense of Amber Hair's Myra. She has a smaller role to play because Lost Kingdom is more beauty comedy than romcom, but she is the lucky player in the story alongside Nicole Kidman's Atlanta. At the risk of beating the dead seahorse that of the Last Kingdom's highly struggle, Atlanta's story is done in a way that left me questioning whether or not he was misremembering the end of Aquaman and she had simply chosen the sea over Arthur's father. She did not, are still very much in love. But Atlanta and John's story is one of several of what I can only assume were Latin Gam story adjustment despite the Lost Kingdom focus on family. Alter and Mirror surprisingly do not fall into the same trap, which only goes to highlight that a few establishing short go a long way toward ensuring your audience understand a relationship while still allowing B character to act independently without confusion. Of course this is an Aquaman film. If you start digging in too deep or asking too many questions, it's all going to unravel. The same can be said for Black Ma's story, but Abdul Martin does a solid job with the material he is given, and like the rest of the Lost Kingdom, it's decent enough if you just sit back and enjoy the ride. The first man work in spite of itself because it's fun and silly, and as a tone at Lost Kingdom mostly near just as well. The sequel also return its predecessor scene of Deep Sea Spectre. There's a level I want you to the construction space and world below the surface that kept me engaged with Atlantis and its surrounding, but the visual beauty mostly being in and ends with a landscape and underwater civilization. The Lost Kingdom was a clean for critics in AMX today. So viewing faces may vary, but many of the antagonist Black Maya excluded are so unattractively rendered that is noted loud enough to make the security guard next to me laugh. They look bad. They may look worse because the sceneries around them is so bright and crisp, but it's definitely a distraction. The first 5 scene falls into the ugly category as well, but it's unclear if it's because it was short-lived and if VFX scenes were undercrunched despite a year-long delay. It's Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom's credit that has no interest in saying farewell to its own shared universe. A continuity that began with The Man of Sail in 2013 and draws to close with his movie in 2023. In fact, it mostly just farted DCO on its way out the door. Say what you will about what is now concluded chapter in DC Cinematic is deserves or does not at Curie going out on this own term with a complete interest in what it means for franchise is both incredibly on brand and objective funny. When Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom is being an Aquaman story and leaning into the silliness and family aspect of it all, it's fun. The enjoyable bites are just sandwiched between some ugly effect and a wide first act dead cobalt together from a very different movie. The relationship between all men and it between Jas Momoa and Patrick Wilson helped the story and is unquestioningly this best part. It's a shame that he turn off James Gunn's this season universe means we will probably never see them again. To be fair to returning Van, this is not the movie he was supposed to make. But to the dread tours of DCO becoming official, Van had planned to go back to his horror road with the Trench and Creepy Moses film before eventually circle back around to a full-blown Aquaman follows up. However, once the Trench was installed, after the overall French impelled it. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, released on December 22, 2023, was always going to carry a heavier burden than most sequels. It was not just another installment in a franchise, it was the last film in the DC Extended Universe, DCEU, as fans had known it for a decade, the concluding chapter of a cinematic universe that began with Zack Snyder's Man of Steel in 2013. By the time Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom hit theaters, the DCEU had already been declared dead by many, with its official future resting in the hands of the new DC Studios co-chairman James Gunn, who had already announced a full franchise reboot. This context colored almost every aspect of how audiences and critics received the film. Some saw it as a mercy killing, others as a missed opportunity, and a small but vocal segment found it to be an unexpectedly enjoyable ride. The first Aquaman was fortunately one of the better DCEU entries, and remarkably, it was the only DCEU movie to cross the billion-dollar mark in worldwide box office receipts. The sequel, however, took so long to reach the shore, 5 years, to be exact, and somewhere in between, the DCEU franchise had been crumbling. Add to that the Amber Heard controversy, multiple reshoots, poor test screenings, and repeated release date delays, and the stage was set for one of the most turbulent releases of 2023. Case's Movie Mania. The film reunites director James Wan with star Jason Momoa as Arthur Curry Aquaman, now juggling his role as King of Atlantis, a member of the Justice League, and a new father. After failing to defeat Aquaman the first time, Black Manta wields the power of the mythic Black Trident to unleash an ancient and malevolent force. Hoping to end his reign of terror, Aquaman forges an unlikely alliance with his brother, Orm, the former King of Atlantis. Setting aside their differences, they join forces to protect their kingdom and save the world from irreversible destruction. Rotten Tomatoes. Critical reception, a deeply divided verdict. The Rotten Tomatoes score, a historic low. Perhaps nothing summarized the critical reception more starkly than the Rotten Tomatoes tomato meter score. The film opened with a debut score of 36%, with only a minority of reviewers having a great time with what will probably be the final installment of the DCEU. To put that in context, Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom received a Rotten Tomatoes score lower than the lowest rated DCEU movie until that point, Justice League, 2017, which had a score of 39%, making it, at launch, the lowest-rated film in DCEU history. CBR Fandom Wire. However, the picture looked considerably brighter from the audience side. Audiences enjoyed the movie considerably more, as it carried an 80% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes, which likely kept the second weekend box office drop from falling even further. This remarkable gap between critic and audience scores became one of the defining narratives of the film's release, a critic-proof movie that ordinary popcorn movie fans found more enjoyable than the press gave it credit for. Screen Rant. Rotten Tomatoes' own consensus offered a measured summary. Jason Momoa remains a capable and committed leading man, but even DC diehards may feel that Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom sticks to familiar waters. Rotten Tomatoes. What critics said, the negative camp. The majority of professional critics were not kind to the film. Several major publications issued particularly damning assessments. Both Peter Bradshaw of The Guardian and The Independent's Clarice Loffrey provided a 1-star rating for the film. Bradshaw compared the humor to Taika Waititi's Marvel films Thor: Ragnarok, 2017, and Thor: Love and Thunder, 2022, and felt Aquaman's role as a father was a derivative trope used as a tired relatability shortcut by Hollywood. He also lamented Randall Park's role in the film, feeling it was entirely wasted, and expressed ambivalent feelings about the cast performances. Wikipedia. Meanwhile, Loffrey labeled the film an entry in the rogues gallery of brainless franchise films, opining that WN might have incorporated elements from his planned Project The Trench into the project. She was surprised the film's theme was about climate change and thought Mera's role was faux feminist and narratively contrived, noting Amber Heard's legal controversies. Wikipedia. Empire magazine's James Dyer captured a sentiment felt widely among mid-range critics. Despite a charismatic turn from Momoa and some fun frenemy banter, this is a disappointing send-off that sees the DCEU go out with a squelch rather than a splash. Richard Roper of the Chicago Sun-Times was blunter, writing that the film is waterlogged with boring villains and underwhelming visuals. Valerie Complex from Deadline noted that while the first Aquaman maintained a balance of seriousness and fantasy, The Lost Kingdom veers into cartoonish territory. David Ehrlich of IndieWire articulated one of the sharpest analytical critiques. The film becomes more and more formulaic as it digs into its mythos, as if the movie were caught between being its own thing and being nothing at all. CBR. The Guardian's Bradshaw described the franchise as flatly flatlining, floating through the dreary depths like a discarded plastic bag. Metacritic. Not all critics were dismissive. Matt Zola cites, writing for RogerEbert.com, offered one of the more nuanced takes. While he acknowledged the film's problems, he found genuine entertainment in its core dynamic. Probably 2/3 of this sequel's running time is devoted to Arthur and Orm doing the argumentative buddies on a mission thing, with a bit of estranged brothers reconciling, plus dashes of redemption narrative, lessons learned, and admitting you were wrong so that you can grow. This is a fun movie, but not anywhere near a great one. Roger Ebert cites also acknowledged one of the film's most persistent criticisms, that something had clearly gone wrong behind the scenes. There's a cluttered too-muchness to the production. You may get the sense that there was chaos behind the scenes, and stuff that was staged and shot with the intention of having it play out full-length had to get pulverized and reconstituted in the editing to make the totality work for audiences and exhibitors. The narrated by Aquaman opening montage plays like an attempt to shave 20 minutes off the running time and get scene setting and expository throat clearing out of the way so the movie could jump ahead to the bits. Nevertheless, sites gave the film a passing grade, finding value in what it delivered. This is a fun ride. Like its hero, it succeeds in spite of itself. And there's something to be said for a big-budget fantasy that knows what not to do, and when to stop. Roger Ebert. Some critics found specific aspects genuinely praiseworthy. John Louis of the Straits Times appreciated its directness. This neon-colored addition to the DC superhero world fills the need for stories that are uncomplicated and packed with action instead of backstory. And several noted that the brotherly pairing of Momoa and Patrick Wilson was the film's most effective element, giving it a warmth and comedic texture that partially compensated for its other shortcomings. CBR. Through design or happy accident, Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom closes out the DCEU on a mid to high water mark. When the plot gets going and we're on a road trip through fantastical locations, the movie becomes a fun ride. It's not as good as the original, but it is still one of the better superhero films of the year. IMDb. Screenplay and story, a cluttered, familiar road. The screenplay, credited to David Leslie Johnson McGoldrick and developed from a story conceived by Wan Momoa and Thomas Paré-Sibert, was arguably the film's most consistently criticized element across every category of reviewer. Though the story of Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom could have had promise, its core skeleton is still littered with comic book movie tropes and motifs that many had officially grown very sick of. Hordes of faceless mooks that aren't really a threat because of main character invincibility, world-ending stakes that are just background noise and clearly won't have any lasting consequences, characters about to be killed but getting saved at the last second, and the supposed main bad guy's actions being influenced by some cursed object that channels another, darker force. Loud and clear reviews. That last storytelling decision, having Black Manta's villainy driven by an ancient supernatural artifact rather than his own personality and grudge, drew particular frustration. Critics felt it diluted the most compelling aspect of the character, his deeply personal vendetta against Aquaman for the death of his father. That trope wouldn't be so bad if it didn't water down Kane's motivation of revenge and divert his plans in ways that don't even help him accomplish that goal. Loud and clear reviews. The film's structure was also seen as a major weakness. The pacing is so obnoxiously fast and leaves its characters so paper-thin that it's hard not to think about how much of the original cut was left in the ocean trench that is the cutting room floor. Characters who have rich histories with each other have the screen chemistry of people who just met, and our reintroductions to them and their reactions to familiar faces showing up are just as quick and insignificant. Kane suddenly has a legion of followers that do his bidding with no explanation. Critical, devastating events happen off-screen after a time skip. Loud and clear reviews. One of the stranger storytelling choices was the film's tonal identity crisis. The film feels like a jumbled medley of imitations from different kinds of films, almost like a parody. There's a 10-minute scene where you felt like this is from an Indiana Jones world, and then the next thing you know, you're stuck in the realm of Journey to the Mysterious Island. IMDb. Instead, the sequel wants to be everything at once. At one point, there's a feeble attempt to address climate change and global warming issues. The Lost Kingdom in the subtitle of this sequel feels more like an afterthought, and then there's the standard issue revenge story revolving around Black Manta's determination to kill Aquaman and destroy his kingdom. Cases Movie Mania. Several reviewers noted that the film's climax, rather than delivering the grand battle one might expect from a franchise finale, took an intimate, smaller-scale approach. The RogerEbert.com review noted that although it doesn't reach the epic scale of the first film's third act, in this one, its third act is much more intimate, involving Aquaman, Orm, and Black Manta. Some critics found this refreshing, others considered it a disappointment. IMDb. Perhaps most damningly, one reviewer described the film's plot as a generic scenario where a CGI big baddie has been awakened by another baddie and Aquaman has to team up with his brother to stop him. The movie looks like a cartoon and the people are obviously acting in front of green screens. Metacritic James Wan, the director who brought us both the original Aquaman and the Conjuring horror universe, came in for surprisingly divided assessments. Most critics recognized his talent, but many felt the evidence of behind-the-scenes chaos, the multiple reshoots, the shifting storylines, the reduced role of cast members, had hamstrung his creative vision. WN never pulls off an action scene as virtuosic as the leaping across rooftops fight in the first Aquaman, but there are some good ones in here, choreographed, framed and edited with Wan's characteristic clarity even when the camera is shaking like an astronaut during liftoff. A few of them play out from a distance with our spec-sized heroes racing through vistas packed with gigantic creatures, machines, armored warriors, jagged rocks, fire, and ice. Roger Ebert. Some reviewers noted Wan's attempts to incorporate his horror filmmaking sensibility. James Wan's direction shines with dynamic camera work and subtle references to classic films like Planet of the Vampires, which enrich the visual experience. Indeed, the film's inspiration from the Silver Age of comic books and retro science fiction aesthetics, reminiscent of Ray Harryhausen's stop-motion creature work, gave it a distinctive if uneven flavor. Metacritic. But lurking just beneath the surface of boredom was the film's uncanny awkwardness through the atmospherics WAN engendered. A number of the sets and even the score feel like something out of a 1950s Flash Gordon serial. It evokes feelings of familiarity, which immediately seem out of place. The cinema files. The editing was also identified as a systemic problem, with many critics sensing that the film visible on screen was substantially different from what had originally been conceived. WAN explained the reshoots by saying he had to make some adjustments during production, as it had been challenging to keep track of the different versions of the DCEU while remaining mindful of other plans for the franchise. Lundgren later said that the studio decided to reshoot much of the footage to rebuild it with a slightly different storyline, reducing his and Hurd's roles. Wikipedia. The cameras didn't give audiences the time to breathe and process the visuals in crowd scenes. A lot of mid to fast cuts, there wasn't much of a sense of appreciation to enjoy the visuals they built. In the end, a sense of discontentment settled in. IMDb. Performances. Momoa and Wilson shine bright in a dim film. If there was one aspect of Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom that critics, audiences, and even some of its harshest detractors could agree on, it was the genuine charm and chemistry between Jason Momoa and Patrick Wilson. The best thing of the film was simply the chemistry between Jason Momoa and Patrick Wilson as their characters in this movie. Wilson, who played the antagonist Orm in the first film, was freed from villain duties here and given the chance to be a reluctant, fish-out-of-water ally. The results, by most accounts, were one of the film's most pleasant surprises. IMDb. Patrick Wilson is so much better here, mainly because he's no longer burdened with being the villain, and that means he can have so much more fun with it. He has a much stronger chemistry with Momoa than his previous scene partner, and it's obvious Momoa really gets along with him as he really comes to life in those scenes. IMDb. Wilson's portrayal of Orm is brilliant, suffusing the character with the tension his inner conflicts have with his motives. The fact that Wilson achieves this without any acting histrionics, but leaves his angst just right above the surface, just enough for audiences to feel it, is probably the standout feature of the film. Metacritic. As for Momoa himself, opinions were slightly more divided, though most credited his raw magnetism with keeping the film watchable. Momoa's raw on-screen energy remains infectious even in the driest scenes, and WAN does wring a real sense of human connection out of the scenes between Momoa and Wilson. IMDb. It's nice to see a character that's actually grown so much between films, and the fact is a parent struggling with a newborn baby stuck in a job he hates means Aquaman has probably never been more relatable. IMDb. However, some critics felt that Momoa was coasting rather than evolving. Although Momoa as an actor has charisma and knows how to steal the show, unlike the first Aquaman, here it feels as if he's just playing himself. There is no real depth to Arthur's arc. By the end he is still this punk cool guy, but nothing else. IMDb. Yahya Abdul-Mateen II as Black Manta received sympathy from nearly every corner. Most reviewers agreed he was giving more to the role than the role deserved. Black Manta was massively overqualified for what was given to him. He's great early on but devolves into a mouthpiece for a proper DCEU villain by the end. The RogerEbert.com review noted his poker-faced commitment to the story, but felt the character and the larger supporting cast were shoehorned in rather than integrated elegantly. IMDb. Yahya Abdul-Mateen II's effort and commitment to his portrayal are evident, making him arguably the standout in this movie. Black Manta is always menacing. IMDb. The supporting cast, Nicole Kidman, Temuera Morrison, Dolph Lundgren, and Randall Park, were largely sidelined. Kidman, Morrison, Lundgren, Abdul-Mateen, and other supporting players exhibit such poker-faced commitment to the story throughout that you might wonder how much richer the film might have been if they'd been integrated elegantly instead of shoehorned in. Roger Ebert. Visual effects and production design, impressive but inconsistent. One of the most polarizing technical elements of the film was its visual effects. The first Aquaman had been widely praised for its bold, psychedelic underwater world-building, its neon colors, bizarre creatures, and sheer visual invention. Whether the Lost Kingdom matched or surpassed that standard was vigorously debated. The effects were often unconvincing in the first film, but the world's designs and color scheme were at least vivid, imaginative, and wonderfully shot. In the sequel, everything looks washed out and muted, and even the exact same settings from the first Aquaman have lost their sense of mythical scale and detail. Loud and clear reviews. The action scenes are well done, but the CGI is often obvious and unrealistic. In conclusion, Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom disappoints as a script, and the visual inconsistencies compound the problem. IMDb. The Metacritic consensus echoed this sentiment. The heavy reliance on CGI created a disconnect from reality that undermined the film's fantastical ambitions. The movie looks like a cartoon and the people are obviously acting in front of green screens that it just looks absurd. Metacritic. That said, there were defenders. Among the fall of superhero movies, the action and VFX are pretty on point, while very jarring, they fit the already ridiculous setting and plot. Aquaman 2 knows exactly what it is. IMDb. The film's production design, particularly its Lost Kingdom sequences and creature design inspired by Harryhausen, drew some affection from critics who appreciated its throwback, campy sensibility. The villain's stop-motion design was a standout, though the character's development felt secondary to the larger story. Metacritic. One aspect of the film that brought joy and laughter was John Rhys-Davies' voice work as the Brine King. His voice reminded one critic of Brian Blessed's Vultan from Mike Hodges' Flash Gordon. The Cinema Files. Humor, too much, too juvenile, or just right? The film's comedic tone divided audiences sharply. The first Aquaman had been praised for its knowing silliness, its flagrantly melodramatic family dynamics and knowingly ludicrous spectacle, like the seahorses that whinnied and the sharks that roared. The Lost Kingdom attempted to continue in that vein, but critics disagreed about whether it landed. Roger Ebert. The movie struggles with humor, particularly in the early scenes, where juvenile jokes hurt the pacing. The film also leans heavily on MCU-style humor, which might not sit well with all audiences. Metacritic. One Metacritic reviewer was particularly pointed. Baby peeing in daddy's face is an ancient rom-com trope. Who permitted this into the screenplay of a big-budget action movie? Metacritic. The comparison to Thor's comedic arc in the MCU came up repeatedly. Critics worried that Aquaman, like Thor, was being transformed into a bumbling dad joke machine at the expense of his heroic credibility. The film did, however, use its humor more purposefully in the Aquaman-Orm dynamic, their bickering and contrasting personalities. Orm's rigid Atlantean formality crashing into the surface world provided some of the film's most genuinely funny moments, although the jokes often fall flat, and sometimes Momoa seems to play himself rather than Arthur Curry. The action set up by James Wan remains thrilling and impeccably choreographed, adding great fluidity to the film. IMDb. The climate change theme, substance or propaganda. One of the more unusual angles of the film's critical conversation was its treatment of environmental themes, specifically climate change. James Wan had spoken in pre-release interviews about climate change being a thematic concern in the film, and the final product did incorporate an ancient energy source, the orichalcum, powering the Lost Kingdom, that accelerates global warming. Fans who appreciate traditional superhero narratives expressed disappointment over the film's departure from genre norms. The infusion of climate change messaging led to debates about the appropriateness of such themes in superhero films and the impact on the overall viewing experience. Delaros. But the majority of critics, including those who took the topic seriously, felt the film handled its environmental messaging superficially at best. The glib trivialization of the climate crisis was among the picture's major failings. These are minor irritations compared with the picture's failure to meaningfully engage the subject. Metacritic. At one point, there's a feeble attempt to address the climate change and global warming issues. The Lost Kingdom in the subtitle of this sequel feels more like an afterthought rather than a fully realized environmental statement. Cases Movie Mania. Conservative commentators took a harsher line. Some fans argued that superhero films should offer an escape from political agendas, expressing frustration over what they perceived as a forced injection of ideologies into the cinematic experience. Delaros. The irony, as several critics noted, was that the film doesn't actually commit to its own environmental messaging. The climate crisis serves primarily as a plot device, a way to raise the stakes, rather than a genuine thematic exploration. The Amber Heard controversy, an elephant in the room. No discussion of Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom's reception would be complete without acknowledging the Amber Heard controversy, which surrounded the film like a storm cloud throughout its production and release. Heard, who plays Mera, had been involved in a highly publicized defamation trial with her ex-husband Johnny Depp in 2022. Depp won a defamation dispute against Heard, and the controversy spread wildly and impacted how the new movie was marketed. Screen Rant. After Amber Heard lost the defamation suit against Johnny Depp, petitions were signed with millions of signatures demanding her removal from DCEU. However, Warner Bros. Continued to include her in the sequel, though her role was significantly reduced, which did not please either side. Koimoi. Several reshoots took place between July 2022 and June 2023 to alter the storyline, while some actors' roles were reduced, including Heard's, whose involvement was the subject of controversy during production. Wikipedia. The critical consensus on Heard's performance was largely muted. Her reduced screen time meant there wasn't much to evaluate. For those who can't stand the sight of Amber Heard, the bad news is that WAN still retains her in the sequel. But her Mera character is more like a placeholder. The weirdly zero chemistry between her and Momoa, in the meantime, is a far cry from what was seen in the first movie. Cases Movie Mania. Mera also has a more substantial role than expected, giving a strong performance despite the ongoing controversy surrounding Amber Heard. This latter view was a minority position, but it underlined how much the real-world narrative surrounding Heard overshadowed any evaluation of her actual performance. Metacritic. Audience reception, a more forgiving verdict. While professional critics were largely unkind, general audiences were measurably more sympathetic, giving the film an 80% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. This divergence, one of the starkest of 2023, tells its own story about the gap between critical expectations and what ordinary moviegoers seek from a superhero blockbuster. Many audience reviewers expressed relief that the film wasn't as bad as the critical drubbing suggested. Going to this film with little to no expectations after hearing how awful people thought it was, many viewers found that to their surprise, it wasn't that bad and they actually enjoyed it. It wasn't without its problems, but many felt pretty satisfied with it being what it was. IMDb. The most enthusiastic audience reviews centered on the same elements that critics acknowledged as the film's strengths: the Momoa-Wilson dynamic, the action sequences, and the sheer visual spectacle of the Atlantean world. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom returns Jason Momoa as the iconic superhero, and while the film has its flaws, it proves to be an engaging follow-up. The chemistry between Arthur Curry and his brother Orm was a pleasant surprise, adding depth to the film's dynamic. Metacritic. All the performances were fine, and I felt more engaged in this one than the first, mostly because we already know about Aquaman and his new family, and what happened to his half-brother Orm. Black Manta feels more threatening here than Orm did in the first movie. IMDb. Some audience members were more explicitly disappointed, echoing critical concerns about originality and creative fatigue. Amongst the fall of superhero movies, Aquaman 2 stands out as a completely average movie that doesn't stand out at all. The genre is really on its last legs. The action and VFX are pretty on point, while very jarring, but the writers didn't improve anything. IMDb. Others placed the film in the context of 2023's superhero landscape more charitably. It's definitely not as good as the first one, but it is better than most of the MCU's latest projects this year, like Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. IMDb. Box office. The final tally. The film's box office performance was yet another narrative thread running through its reception. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom is the sequel to 2018's Aquaman, which brought in over $1.1 billion on a budget of approximately $160 million. Lost Kingdom had a budget of $205 million and needed to earn $400 million worldwide to break even, a goal that was challenging given the current trends. Screen Rant. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom's disappointing box office run continued, with a 51% drop in earnings from its opening day as it fell to second place at the box office. The film's underperformance followed a series of failures by other DCU movies, including Shazam, Fury of the Gods, The Flash, and Blue Beetle. Screen Rant. The film ultimately earned approximately $439 million worldwide, respectable for most films but a significant underperformance compared to the $1.1 billion of the original. It was, in many ways, a fitting metaphor for the state of the DCEU at the end, still generating money, still attracting audiences, but nowhere near its former heights. The DCEU's final chapter, legacy and context. The critical conversation around Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom was inseparable from its status as the last DCEU film before the full reboot under James Gunn's stewardship. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom is the final film in the DCEU before it's rebooted entirely, and it seems very apparent to many observers that the people in charge only cared about getting the movie done and chucking it out so the whole continuity could be over with. If Warner Bros. Really did have that mindset towards this and the year's other DC films, that paints a very sad picture of where its head is at when it comes to its blockbusters in general. Loud and clear reviews. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom shows the comic book movie genre at its most stale and soulless, sending the DCEU out with a whimper at the bottom of the sea. This was perhaps the harshest verdict in the entire critical landscape, not just an attack on the film itself, but on the institutional failure it represented. Loud and clear reviews. More measured assessments acknowledged the film's place in a difficult moment for superhero cinema broadly. It's no surprise that the DCEU has reached its die another day moment, when it becomes clearly obvious that it's time to take things in a drastic new direction. IMDb. Greetings from Lithuania. As one international reviewer put it, it's clear that creators of Aquaman really had ideas only for one movie. The sequel is a very generic and mediocre superhero flick. While it is not the worst one by far. It is colorful, loud, with tons of CGI. But the story is very generic. Knowing now that this was the final film in this franchise and DC universe itself, one can't stop thinking that it was unavoidable for WB to restart this universe. Metacritic. With Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, we get the best and worst of the DCEU, but also a reminder that there's still hope for these characters with a bit more focus, and a reminder of what works and what doesn't with this world. IMDb. What worked? A summary of genuine strengths. Despite the predominantly mixed to negative critical consensus, reviewers consistently identified several genuine strengths. The Momoa-Wilson chemistry. This was the film's most universally praised element. Their buddy comedy dynamic, Arthur's brash informality clashing with Orm's imperious Atlantean rigidity, gave the film its warmest and most human moments. Wilson's reintroduction is the film's most graceful and inventive part, serving as the foundational theme. The cinema files. Action choreography. When the action sequences worked, they worked well. The action set up by James Wan remains thrilling and impeccably choreographed, adding great fluidity to the film. IMDb. A more intimate third act. Rather than relying solely on CGI spectacle for the climax, the film pulled back and focused on the personal stakes between Aquaman, Orm, and Black Manta, a choice that resonated with many viewers even if others found it underwhelming compared to the first film's finale. Yahya Abdul-Mateen II's commitment. Even in a poorly written role, Abdul-Mateen's intense, physical performance as Black Manta gave the film a genuine sense of menace and stakes. Visual world-building in flashes, the glimpses of the Lost Kingdom, the retro sci-fi monster designs, and certain underwater sequences showed genuine imagination and visual ambition, even if the execution was uneven. What failed? The consensus criticisms. The screenplay. Virtually all critics agreed the script was the film's most fundamental failure, predictable, trope-laden, and seemingly assembled from the cutting room floor of a more ambitious movie. Tonal inconsistency. The film never settled on whether it wanted to be a dumb fun adventure, a heartfelt family drama, an environmental parable, or a horror-tinged sci-fi journey. It attempted all and fully achieved none. Black Manta's underuse. A villain with enormous potential and a brilliantly committed actor was sidelined by a supernatural artifact plot device, robbing the film of its most compelling emotional conflict. The supporting cast's marginalization. Nicole Kidman, Dolph Lundgren, and Randall Park were given so little to do that their presence felt contractual rather than organic. CGI inconsistency. While some sequences dazzled, others looked noticeably cheaper and more artificial than the first film, undermining the sense of a fully realized underwater world. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom was, ultimately, a film defined by its context as much as its content. It was the last gasp of a cinematic universe that had never fully realized its potential, arriving after years of delays, controversies, reshoots, and declining audience enthusiasm for superhero films broadly. Under those conditions, perhaps the most remarkable thing about it is that it was entertaining at all, that Momoa's infectious energy, Wilson's surprisingly layered performance, and Wan's competent action direction could produce a watchable, occasionally fun blockbuster even from such compromised material. Critics were largely right that the film was generic, narratively thin, and a disappointing send-off. But audiences were also right that it delivered the basics of entertainment, chemistry, spectacle, and enough humor to pass 2 hours pleasantly. Featuring stunning visual effects and plenty of action.